Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting of Portsmouth Council on Wednesday, January 30th, 2019, 9:02. We'll start with disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. No, I have none. All right, so we don't have a mover or a seconder.
Oh, yeah, that's because you take it from the floor and then I will.
Sure. Can I get a mover for, should I read it first and then get a mover?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to read this. That council received confidential report financial 2019-006 and confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, CAO clerk, regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with respect to OMERS. Can I get a mover? Councillor Sapoulis, and a seconder. Councillor Roth, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Our next item is a communications, a verbal update from CEO Karen Landry with respect to the Ontario Trillium Foundation grant.
Okay, so I may need to enroll Mary's assistance while I speak to this matter, but we received notification from the OTF with respect to our application for the grant, which had to do with works at the
Soccer fields.
soccer
Yep.
fields. The good news, we were successful in getting the grant. That's excellent news.
Oh.
The bad news is that we have to say when we're starting within the next couple days. And on that note, Mary, maybe do you want to just speak to the particulars and the complications of the start date and the end date and staying qualified for the funding?
Sure. Okay, so we received notice from them, and basically I indicated what our dilemma was and that we were waiting to obtain other grant funding sources and donations from third parties. They indicated that we could extend the grant a maximum of 3 years, but we must confirm a start date. And the term of the grant, so they provide the funds the day after the start date, and they need to be utilized within 1 year. So they've indicated that it's pretty important to pick a...
A realistic start date.
Right.
That's really good, honestly.
Well, I was happy that we received some grant funding. It's just, there's a little bit of a dilemma in this one, so.
Okay, start with Councillor Boyna.
Well, first of all, that's amazing news, so that's great. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
When you're saying confirm a start date, is this starting actual, like, shovel in the ground construction?
Exactly.
And so a big component of it is the donations component. And so what is the process, I guess, in getting that going? And do we put a time frame on gathering the donations? Because I think that will probably be the number one delay,
Well,
maybe?
there's a couple delays. There's, first of all, there's the soccer club would be the lead with respect to raising the donation components funds for the project. The second delay, which is the completely unknown, is this project is contingent on both federal and provincial funding,
Right, which is currently showing us 50% of the project costs.
which there has not been any announcement for us to apply for such a grant
Right.
as of yet.
Okay, Councillor Quetta, you.
Is that what the Canadian infrastructure
Exactly.
component of it?
Yeah.
And so we have to let them know the start date in the next couple of days, even without knowing
Correct.
this? Is that correct?
Yes, and we advised them of our dilemma, and yes, so in essence, I wouldn't recommend, based on not knowing the status of any grant applications with both the provincial and federal government at this point, because if we don't start it this year, then we lose this funding, and if we give a start date of this year. I think we have to seriously consider looking at next year.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
or later.
Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, I'd like to suggest we delay it by a year. I keep looking at the parkland dedication fees. Like, we're getting a sizable amount of money if that development materializes. This is the one in Morriston. That's at least $140,000 right there in parkland dedication fees there. And that's a lot of money, so delaying it by a year will allow us to accumulate that as well. And we can also ask the soccer field to try to see soccer people trying to get the commitments from their own sources for funding as well. So that way you'd have good lead time. So I would suggest we delay by a year and say it's going to be a year from now. And a year from now, if we don't get the other indications, we lost the grant, we lost everything, but certainly it leaves it open for a year.
Okay, Councillor Rowe?
How much is this grant?
Is it 115, Mary?
150, yep.
1,000.
So it is substantial. Yeah, so if we delay it by a year, we would have to reapply for this grant, or can't we?
No.
No, so we are able to make the start date within 3 years of signing the contract.
Okay, so we could still get this grant if we delayed it a year.
Yes, it's just picking a reasonable, realistic start date. That's the dilemma we have right now.
Okay. I would have to agree with that we would delay it a year.
Okay. Councillor Bulmer?
Yeah, I would even, this, the nice thing is this gives a 4-year window to get the job done. So it was 3 years to start and a year to finish it. I guess I'd be comfortable even if we went start date 2 years. That gives us 2 application cycles for provincial and federal grants. It gives the soccer club 2 years to release the funds, and it still gets the job done within 3 years.
Madam CEO would like to make a comment.
I just have to,
Actually, sorry, Madame CEO.
No, go
Okay. So we have within 3 years to provide the start date of the date of signing the contract.
That's right.
And we have within 1 year from that start date to spend the funds. So,
That's right.
yeah.
That's 4
you don't,
years.
you don't have 3 years to do the work.
No, you have 1 year to do the work, but
Yeah.
we have 3 years to start it. So that's 4 years total.
Yeah.
So I'm suggesting if we did start 2 years from now, we still have the project done within 3 years. And in terms of, instead of making them wait 5 years, it gives us 2 cycles of grant applications to be successful provincially or federally. Gives soccer 2 years to raise the funds. I just gives a little more cushion to give everybody a chance to get the funding into place. I agree with Councillor Sapoulis, and we'll have, that other fund will be growing. But if we make it a year and we're not able to make all those other things, it'd be nice to have a second kick at the can and give soccer that extra bit of time.
Madam CEO,
The only thing I would ask, and Mary could speak to this, is just typically those other grants, you have to be
ready to go.
ready to go. Do you not typically have to?
Correct.
There isn't that lead time, so, do you know what I'm saying, Counselor
Yes.
Palmer? Like you have to have your project ready to go. Usually, I think it's within a 6-month period of getting that grant funding. So if we were successful getting the provincial or federal grant funding this year or next year, you have to be ready to go. You can't be delaying it out another year. And we have this grant now to contend with a start date. So it's difficult.
Oh, I understand. So then
Yeah.
that's, even setting a date of next year creates a challenge if we get a grant this year.
Potentially.
That has to start within 6 months. We're already committed to a
There's-
start date.
There's the potential, yes.
So there's risk either way.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have an issue putting it off a year. I've just, and what the heck, a deadline sometimes makes people pedal faster.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Councillor Bulmer. I'd just like to make a comment about the parkland dedication fees. You know, that $140,000 is coming out of Morriston, and I'd like to see, like, that's not, to all go into Aberfoyle. You know, we have parks and things that need upgrades in Morriston. I don't know if there's any other developments going to come, so that's the last time that, I shouldn't say the last time, but the significant amount of funding is going to come out of that community. And if we spend it all somewhere else, I think that would be upsetting to the residents down there. So I would definitely want to see some of that money allotted towards improvements in parks within the Morrison community. Maybe a question to the Director of Public Works. Is the scope of this soccer field in stone? Does it have to be as proposed, such an exorbitant, project?
Currently, right now, we got a copy of the contract, the construction contract. I'm actually going through it at this time.
Okay.
No, it's not written in stone. I mean, there's changes that can be made, and I'm already starting to make some to bring the cost down as much as what I see, in my own opinion, does. I mean, that obviously would have to come in front of council
Yeah.
for the final decisions, but, yeah, we're just, we got the major paperwork on it. We're still waiting on a couple things from the consultant yet for the contract, but we're close.
Okay, thank you. Another quick question for the Director of Finance. Is the grant funding on a percentage base? So on the larger project, if we reduce the scope of the project, then does the funding get reduced, or do we get 150 towards it?
We get 150 towards it under the Ontario Trillium Fund application, but for the other application, usually it's about 50% of the total project cost that would be eligible.
Okay. All right.
One additional.
I'll just start again at this side. Councillor Gordon, do you have any-
I just have one more question. I'm looking at the capital, the sheet for the park, and I'm looking at the cash in lieu of parkland line, and it says that it's required to be spent by November 30th, 2019. And I'm just wondering,
Oh, sorry, that's the, that's actually the County of Wellington Trail funding.
okay, and you have to excuse me, but have we now said that we'll reallocate this to the Fox Run Park?
Exactly.
Should we not be able to use it?
Yep.
So that's not going to come into play in terms of losing funding if we delay this start date until next year, correct?
So right now, the budget shows that 43,404, the Wellington County Trail funding, being utilized for Fox Run Park.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think, I guess there's risk either way, but I think that, especially given that we don't know whether we're going to get the other grants or not yet, that definitely starting it next year would be, I think, the most favorable thing.
Okay, so are we having a discussion on whether we're going to delay it for a year or 2 years, or I'll let Councillor Zapoulis.
I'd like to suggest 1 year. I'd like to discuss with you offline the extravagant comment you made for this soccer field. I don't think it's extravagant at all. I'll go line by line with you and explain what I think is there, but that's offline. With respect to the 1 year, I'm looking at it also from the point of view there's going to be a federal election, and there's going to be carrots thrown out there, here and there. So I think it'd be an opportunity to capitalize on that at this time. So I'm optimistic that we'll get some funding from the feds, and if we can tie it into, get them to agree to it next year, I think would work well in our favor.
Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I agree. I certainly don't want to delay this 2 years. I don't think that is fair to the soccer club. I think we need to get a commitment from the soccer club, and I don't know how we do that. But I think we have to get a commitment, because if we don't, they're not going to start raising money. Now, I know John was at their AGM, maybe he can talk to that, but I don't know if it's possible for us to give them a dollar amount, what we're going to need, or
Well, I gave them the dollar amount that we have in the project sheets was 89,000, and I gave them the project sheets as well, and they're fully aware of it, and the president of the club is saying, look, we're willing to go, we're going to go, we're going to go to our usual corporate donors, we're going to go hit the Optimist Club as well, just tell us when we should start going. So they're ready to go, it's a matter of us pushing the button with them to get moving on it. So if we agree as council, we want them to start moving on it, then we can get a letter sent from the CAO and get them to start moving on it, and give them the information that we got partial grant, that we're going to try to get it going next year, and somehow we're going to try to fill out the dollars.
I guess the only problem with that would be they could raise their 89,000, and then we don't get any other grant funding, and then we say, whoops, we can't do this project, so where does that leave us then? I mean, they've still got that money, but
Well, I'm going to argue that we're going to have parkland fees
Yeah.
coming in. And I'll argue with the mayor on that point, like this parkland dedications fees is across the board for everybody. And
I agree with
This is a new soccer field. It's not existing facilities that have to be updated. I don't have a problem with going through and trolling through the parkland dedication fees and saying, okay, what needs to be updated, and let's get a cost estimate of what needs to be updated and allocate the fees appropriately. We have to spend the money strictly in parkland dedication fees, and it's a question of understanding what we have, what are our needs, and then working from that. I'm not averse to saying, yes, we got to update everything, including Morriston, but I certainly don't want to lose out on the soccer field when we got $150,000 there just begging for the taking type of thing.
Thank you.
Counselor Bulmer?
Thank you. Yeah, one question about the timing, setting the time. If we set it if we did set a date that was 2 years down the road to provide everybody more time to get their money in place, is it possible to move it forward? Would Trillium be averse to moving that forward? I can understand they'd be averse to moving it back, but I guess
They
for
were
their
very
books,
stern, Counselor Bulmer, with us.
be a date.
Weren't they, Mary? Like, I'm reading it. They're basically saying, I want to stress that you'll
Yeah.
lose your grant.
Hard start.
If you move forward, if you decide to go early.
Yeah, the start date is to be your start date.
Okay.
They've said it in no uncertain terms.
Councillor Roth made an interesting point regarding the soccer club raising funds and then we not getting the rest of the funding. That would be a difficult position to put them in. And/or being in a position where they fell short by the start date. And I'd be looking to staff to look at, are there alternatives that we can put in place to help protect them from either of those eventualities? In terms of, I don't want to say holding the mortgage is the best comparator I could come up with, is that if they fall short, we still proceed and allow them to continue to achieve their goals, in the following 6 months or a year after. I don't want to lose all the funding just because if soccer falls short by a little bit. Is that possible?
Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. As part of your next reporting package, I will have the balances in restricted and discretionary reserves. And so I think that will give you a better picture of how we look with our reserves before we make those types of commitments. But Karen, did you want to
Well,
elaborate?
the only other thing is, I guess, council can always consider issuing debt itself to cover that cost while additional funds are maybe raised by the soccer club. Those are things that you'd have to consider at the time. But there isn't anything that we could guarantee for them in terms of them collecting the money. If there was a decision not to proceed and they've collected that money, I'm afraid there's nothing the township can do other than proceed with the project and look at its means of actually funding it.
So as long as, I guess what I'm hearing is, as long as they're aware of those risks and they structure their fundraising to address that eventuality, I just want to make sure then we can address, that we can fully afford the project and proceed, and if they fall short, the project doesn't stop, we can allow them to catch up over time.
I'll qualify that fully funding with council considering issuing debt to pay, if it was determined we didn't have enough in reserves.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Bulmer. So from what I understand, currently we've moved the trail funding from the county to the Fox Run development. Is that correct, Director?
Trail funding? It's been moved from the soccer fields to the Fox Run Park based on our last meeting.
So we would need an updated number for the soccer club, because who's going to make up that extra $44,000 of funding?
I got from council's direction that the cash in lieu of Parkland would fund the remainder, and that's what the capital budget sheet is showing for the 43,404 in the soccer fields.
Okay, so I guess we have a motion from John to delay the project for a year. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Roth, all in favor?
Can I?
Oh,
I think we should take the initiative today to set a date for commencement. That would put some pressure on the soccer club to meet that deadline. And I think Councilor Sapoulos has a point. We have the in lieu of Parkland fund and the Trillium Fund. I don't see any reason why this project can't go ahead one way or the other.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
And I think if we set a date, everybody knows it's going to happen, and they're going to have to get on their horse and start riding. And it gives us a better chance to source other funding as well.
Okay. Councillor Spills?
Yes, to that motion, I'd like to add that we ask the CEO to write to the soccer club advising them of the date and the funding that we're asking them to start collecting through their donations as well.
I guess the soccer club would be best to ask when the most appropriate time to start construction would be, or the Director of Public Works. I'm assuming fall. They wouldn't want to lose their summer, so fall of 2020.
I would think the spring would be appropriate because you want to have it ready for the fall.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, my opinion would be go to tender early in 2020. You know, even, or like even now.
Yeah,
Go for tender with construction and start in May.
that's,
Well, May would be the date?
That's what I would suggest. yeah.
And that is actually what the landscape planning consultant recommended as well, just based on, so.
So is that good, is that good enough for our date for postponing for a year? It's May 2020, May 1st, May?
typically, as if I may, Don, I know that they've talked about the spring, so is May like really a reasonable date to put in, just for the funding purposes as a start date? They wouldn't get in the ground, like, they wouldn't start before that date, right?
Again, depending on what the weather does.
Yeah.
I mean, even at the 1st of May, I mean, even if it's still really wet, there's work that could be started in the parking lot area and
Okay.
higher ground, so.
Okay, okay.
Just a question, is the grant conditional on start of construction or award of contract? Because that's a difference. You can award the contract anytime you want and then start.
That's the start of the project.
The start date.
I don't know what the definition of start date is.
I am pretty sure that it's the start of construction.
Okay.
And we can't control that.
Okay.
I just have a quick question.
Go ahead.
With the soccer club, if we're going to set a date for, I guess there's really two dates we need to set, is a construction start date and a date in which the donations need to be raised. And would those days coincide, or would they be able to continue to raise funds throughout the summer during the construction of the soccer field?
We would let them continue to raise funds as long as they possibly could.
I think they should be reporting to council.
However, we would ask them, like, ideally, we would want to know that they have those funds in hand as
Before
soon
we
as
start.
possible. We would work with them, though, of course.
And that was the point I was getting at, is the project proceeds regardless. We may carry the cost until they raise
Yep.
them all.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I think Councillor Sepoulos mentioned the CEO should write a letter to the soccer club, but I think it's got to be worded in such a way that we need their commitment and get a true commitment from them, that they are willing to contribute a minimum of a certain amount of money.
Why don't, if I just may offer, like, I'll write a letter, but I'll ask Bruce to come in
Yeah.
and meet with me, and, because they're not aware, like, council has just been made aware of this $150,000 grant. And unfortunately, we don't have a long time frame in which to give them a start date, so we had to bring it to your attention. So I'll let him know what's happened, and let him know of the need for them to raise funds and the projected start date, which we've given, committed to, and ask him to raise as much money as he possibly can. If he can raise more than the 89,000 or 90,000, that would even be better.
So we still need a motion for that, right? As
Oh,
of
no,
now?
that's okay.
You're okay?
Yep.
Even for the start date? Okay, any other questions or
And
comments?
also the letter as well.
Yeah, I'll do the letter, yeah.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, all right, so we will go down to reports, I guess, Madam CA?
Yeah, the second report. So we're going to do your capital and operating budget update first.
Okay.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, the only thing that we hadn't dealt with, council was actually just reviewing the operating budget by department, if there were any questions. And I'm not sure what page that is on in your electronic copy. So it's Schedule A to Mary's report, Finance 2019-07.
Give me a second to pull it up. Do we have a page number? It's down near the bottom.
361.
Administration's the first department.
To load. All right, so
What page you on?
361. And I think what we'll do is, if everybody's okay, I'll just ask on each, department, and if there's any questions or comments, we'll try to make quick work of this. I get swirly thing. All right, so is everybody on page 361? My computer is currently not cooperating. Do it old school. All right, so the first page we're going to review is administration for the 2019 budget. Is there any questions or comments on that? Okay, seeing none.
I just have one question.
Councillor Rowe?
And this pertains to everything, I guess, but we have 2018 budget and 2018 year-to-date. Is that actual?
Year-to-date?
Year-to-date, is that the end of the year?
It's actual, and there are entries that still need to be made.
There's
So that
still-
could change?
Yes. And basically through the audit process, there's still many entries that need to be made, and our auditors are coming in mid-February, so. But Karen?
I'll just add to that, Councillor Roth, the year-to-date, because we accept bills up to a certain date in January for services that were incurred in 2018. That is part of the impact.
That's part of it as well, yep.
Thank you.
Just give me 1 second here. My computer's starting to work again, so I'm going to try and pull it out. Just stay on standby there. Okay, so still in admin. The next page, 362. I don't see anything for administration. We're just going to stick to administration, then do building, not in
Yep.
order.
In the order, yep.
Anybody find the next administration page?
Oh, building was next.
Oh, building?
Yep, right after admin.
Oh, sorry.
I don't take up a lot of room on the budget sheet.
Oh, sorry. So any questions or comments on the building budget for 2019? Around?
Oh, I see. Oh, you're going through the capital sheets, right? Or the
No.
operating sheets?
Operating
Operating.
sheets,
Oh,
because
okay.
that was all we had left to do, Councillor Bomer.
Oh, I'm on the report that you just gave us, all the
Oh,
updates.
we'll just, yeah, if we could just.
Oh, right,
make sure
okay, no
there are
problem.
No questions, and then we'll go back to the
Okay, so that was building. I don't think.
Those, okay.
Building.
bylaw sheet next.
Expenditures. Let me pull up bylaw. There's bylaw. So on page 365 of Schedule A, we're looking at the bylaw budget. Any questions or comments? See none. All right. So keep going. Council is on. Oh, did I miss corporate?
Corporate, yep,
Oh.
and then council.
I missed corporate. Any questions or comments on corporate? Looking around the table, there it is, there's 2 lines. Nothing? All right, now we're on to council. Any questions or comments on council for the 2019 budget? Don't see any. Elections? Any questions or comments? Oh, I have a comment. I didn't realize that elections were so expensive for a municipality.
Yeah.
It's just the nominees. Finance. All right. Any questions or comments on finance? Okay. Fire and rescue. Any questions or comments for fire and rescue? Oh, I'd have a quick question for Chief Holmes. Sure. Yes, please. It'll be brief. Welcome. Sorry to put you on the
Worship.
spot.
And members of council, no problem.
It'll be very quick. I just noticed on your vehicle maintenance that, your budget let me scroll up here a little bit. Your 2017 actuals were significantly lower than 2018, and we've budgeted less than the 2018 year-to-date. Are we looking forward to having it in line with what's budgeted, or did just kind of a few things come out of the woodwork that?
That's a budget line that's hard to keep true, for sure, because we come across repairs that are necessary for our apparatus that's out of control. What also happened in 2018 was that there was a very expensive repair done to Aerial 33 in 2017. That service provider did not provide us with the invoice until the beginning of 2018, so that rolled over.
All right, and if we do go over, I guess the questions for the Director of Finance, we just have contingency fund, or where do we, if we end up doubling the budget for 19?
We currently I don't believe that we have a policy on going over, but I think in total, the expenses in the fire and rescue department are, like, the actuals are lower than what was budgeted, so.
Okay, that's all I had, just curious what happened
Yeah.
in 2018 for the, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments on the fire and rescue budget while we have Chief Combs? No? Thank you.
Got off easy.
So far, so
I can make it more difficult next time. Okay, Heritage Committee. I didn't miss anything, did I, Madam CEO? Expenditures for Heritage Committee. Any questions or comments on their budget? Okay. Library. Any questions or comments?
Well, some of these are also covered in that update report we got.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Almost there.
Okay, Municipal Office. Oh, question here.
Yes, our costs recovered from the building department, why is it less this coming year than last year by about 2,000?
I can, so basically that amount is just 30% of the total, total budget and, the total 2019 budget. And, like hydro is lower than what was budgeted last year, just based on actuals. Like if you look at the 2019 budget versus the 2018 budget, it's lower by approximately 5,000, so that's what's resulted in a lower amount to be funded by the building department. It's just a percentage of the total cost.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. ORC, I'm on page 377. Any questions or comments on that page? See none.
On
You got one?
page 378, the revenues.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it spills over in 377 as well. Question for our director, how are the ice rentals coming along this year?
Actually, they're going along really well. We're either on par with our leagues, or we might even be one above that. And the time slots that we've made available for one-off rentals seem to be doing well also, so.
Okay, so the 2019 budget will be better than the 50,000 we're showing here then?
We hope so.
We hope.
Depends when the wild spell comes.
Come out on the right side of that number,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. I also have a question for the director. I heard you mention to Mary that you were looking at maybe offering more one-off rentals. Is that still in the works for this season?
No, not at this point. We've got our schedule set. We provided, I believe it was five hours a week that are available for one-offs. And it still allows us to provide pretty close to what we were providing in free time last year for free skates and shinny. By putting the five hours or 6 hours in this year, we felt that we didn't need to change our hours of operation to do that. We were able to squeeze that in, and it'll give us a good feel of, whether that's the way we need to really look at things going forward.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, what's next? Parks. Love my parks. Okay, any questions or comments on parks? I don't see any. Okay, PCC. Any questions or comments on the PCC? No. PDAC, page 382. Any questions or comments on PDAC? Okay, planning. Any questions or comments on planning? Seeing none. Public Works. Any questions or comments on Public Works budget? No. Councilor Willis?
Just the part-time wages have gone down considerably, 2018 to 2019. Almost $20,000 drop.
So as part of last year's budget, when we introduced the Dawn full-time Parks and Public Works employee, we recommended that in 2019, we would decrease the seasonal equipment operators from 2 to 1. So that's why you're seeing a decrease in that line item.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I have a question for the Director of Public Works. How are we making out with winter control and staffing and, you know, are we just making the grade or are we working our guys to the?
I mean, it's a never know. You never know what the weather's going to bring. If you want to look over the last week or so, the staff has been they've been logging a lot of hours. Overtime in January is going to be pretty high on that. The biggest concern is, you know, we still are to follow the 60-hour rule. That was brought in a number of years ago. I mean, we have ways around that to do that, but it's not a good practice to get into, to start calling a snow emergency every time it snows, just so you can work your staff as many hours as you want. The biggest thing going forward is going to be trying to find, or trying to implement staffing to bring in an afternoon shift. At least have some coverage through the afternoon hours for the evening commutes. I mean, we do have a staff on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But, you know, which is fine, but when that staff member's already worked 12 to 14 hours and then goes home and gets called out for a slippery condition in the middle of the night, you know, it's not the best scenario. So I think, you know, going forward, we're gonna have to look at initiating something different here. I mean, we're probably the only township in the county that is not running some type of shift work in here, and we're the township that is dealing with the highest traffic volumes as well outside of the county. So I think that demand's coming. I don't think it's coming. I think it's already here. So it's definitely something that's going to have to be looked at going forward, even just to be able to meet the standards, you know, of
Right.
timeframes.
So would we need a proposal from you for that, or, you know, council, I don't know if we should have this discussion, maybe asking staff to provide us with some costing for some afternoon coverage for winter maintenance? So are you talking about basically a seasonal or part-time individuals coming in for the winter only kind of thing?
Yeah, I would suggest that the way looking forward would to be, I know we decreased for 2019, the one seasonal staff member, but I would suggest that may be something that needs to be revisited, to re-implement that back in, to give us that option, even if it's we only have one staff member that's going to be here to work, say, a 3 to 11 shift or a 4 to midnight. I mean, other municipalities are running, you know, with one staff through that time frame, and the county does as well. But at least it's boots on the ground here, right? Should something happen.
I'm going to open it up to council to ask you some questions on it, just because this is kind of new information, and I have another question. So, Councillor Goyda, do you have any questions concerning that?
No, I definitely, I would say that, yes, we probably do need to have somebody here, especially for the evening commutes, as I experienced this week myself. But I'm wondering if perhaps that might be a discussion that we would have for our 2020 budget, rather than implementing this now, seeing that we're already most of the way through the wintertime. I don't know if that's something that's, that we could implement this year in any case. That would be my only comment.
Councillor Sepoulis?
I looked at, this is a budget proposed by staff. They didn't indicate it as something that they're considering for the future, so I would agree with Councillor Goyda that it'd be a 2020 item.
Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I would agree to that to an extent, but we are in the beginning of the 2019 snow budget, right? With this being January and the end of next year being still 2019. If it's going to affect our service levels, maybe something that should be discussed.
Councillor Bomer?
Yeah, I think I understand where Councillor Goyda and Sepoulis are coming from, but I think Councillor Roth makes an excellent point. If we wait until this time next year, we will have missed the second half. We'll be in the same boat again. So is it, although we may not be able to get someone online for this half of the 2019 snow season, should we start this discussion to get someone on for the November, December part of 2019? So it's not, it wouldn't be a full year cost, but it would be the cost to get someone on. I don't know if that would work. I'll have to look for staff for that kind of things. When is the right time to get this process going so that we have someone in place for the next winter maintenance season?
Can you speak of that, Madame CEO?
I would suggest that if we were, I think we need to look at what the need is and understand what the financial impact is for the township in putting this in place. So that being said, I would suggest then that there would, if you're looking at hitting the end of this season, we should be reporting back to you, I would say, in the summer at the latest. And number two, though, we wouldn't be able to do anything from a financial perspective, given that this budget doesn't include any funds for 2 months, for the November and December of 2019.
It doesn't?
Well, it wouldn't include additional funds. If you were looking at bringing someone in for those 2 months, that money isn't currently included in the budget. I would suggest, that being said, I think council can always consider how they would fund those 2 months if it was determined that we were to put that position in that place at that time. We can always look at where we're at from a budget point of view at that given place and time, and then look at how it could be funded for those 2 months. And then you could have your discussions in terms of funding it in the following year, knowing that you're making that commitment at that time.
Okay, then we'd have the proper information.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're putting the full funding off at least a year, but with additional information, looking at partial funding partway through the year.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I would suggest that we come back to you with
With a
what we
report.
would normally do with any position, the justification and the reasons in support of that position and what the cost would be.
Okay.
Thank you.
So do we have a consensus to just direct staff to come back to us in you said summer, with a costing and exactly what they need?
Yeah.
Okay. You okay with that, Director of Public Works? I have one other.
He's okay
He
with
won't
it.
even be here.
Yeah.
You're just going to load it on the new guy or girl. My other question for you is, during the election, there was a lot of questions to me about tree cutting. And I don't see anywhere in the budget where tree cutting, other than what's proposed in the asset management plan, where we have tree cutting. So where does that come from, and is it sufficient? And I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay, so any tree maintenance that we do outside, like we're bringing a contractor, the funding comes out of road maintenance supplies, which we have a budget of 35,000. But there are other major items that also come out of that account system. If you look at it, the mower rental, that we cut roadside grass at a minimum twice per year, costs us roughly around $9,000 to $10,000 a year to do that. Coal mix, we're spending on average close to $8,000 a year on coal mix. Catch basin cleanings, about another 6,000 a season. Equipment rental, grade all rental for ditching, another 5. So we're, right there, we're at 28,000 without even talking about a tree yet. Trees to bring in a contractor is about $1,800 a day. So it doesn't leave a lot there. We also have culverts that we need to buy to replace that we can do ourselves, like driveway culverts, equalizers, guardrail repairs when we're not able to bill third party for, that can go anywhere from, $2,000 to $5,000 depending on how badly they're hit. And then just miscellaneous supplies from there. So to answer your question, there really is no money that's allotted specifically for forestry work. So, I mean, we take what we get in calls. I mean, staff will do what we can in-house. Council needs to be reminded that in the summertime, outside of my supervisor, we have 3 staff back here, right? So by the time you do traffic control and all that type of stuff to start taking down trees, there's not a lot of staff here to be able to do that. And the majority of trees we're talking about now and getting calls on are, we're talking 100-year-old trees. And there's no way that in-house staff can deal with those. They need to come down in pieces and they need to come down safe. So we usually bring the contractors in, we'll provide traffic control for them. They'll bring them down to a certain point, leave the brush, and we'll move to the next one. We try and get as many trees in as we can, and then our staff will go back later, clean up the brush, drop the butt, and carry on from there. So, short answer, there's not a lot of money for tree work.
What would be a good starting point to start addressing the concerns of these trees on the sides of our roads?
I would say, I think if there was a specific line item entered into the budget for just forestry work, so we could have a better idea going forward of what the need is. $20,000 is probably going to give you 12 to 15 days worth of contract work. To me, it's not a lot of days. It's not going to go very far. I mean, you could start a contractor on one road and just have them go. Milton called me a while back. They were taking care of a bunch of their stuff at our boundary road. They identified 60 trees on one of our roads, or 30 trees on one of our roads, and it was $60,000 to remove those trees. So obviously I said no. So we just prioritize it. They come in, we prioritize it. We look at, if it comes down, where's it coming down and what damage can be done. Obviously, if it's going to damage a house or any in that regard, that's top priority. We'll deal with them right away. Outside of that, we do what we can.
Yeah, but in your opinion, is there a need for additional funding, or, what we're doing now, is it a Band-Aid, or, our current level?
If there's an opportunity to insert additional funding for forestry work, I would say that would be a good move on the township's part to at least get that program started. I mean, there are thousands of trees out there that are getting to that point.
Okay, just a quick question, if I'll open it up to maybe the Director of Finance for the Asset Management Plan. There's a section in it that's for subdivision trees. Now, would that end up being, if it goes through, would that end up being a separate line, and we could maybe expand that policy update to include roadside trees, and would that be an avenue to have this discussion? Maybe Madam CEO, I should maybe be asking, but.
But the only financial implication associated with those trees is the $6,000 in inspections every 5 years.
Right. Well, there would have to be additional funding, but I'm just wondering maybe through Madam CEO if that's where we should be having this conversation, through the asset management plan, or?
Well, it's obviously a service level decision, right, that council would be making. So I guess if you're going to introduce a new service level, you might want to have the particulars in terms of what that service level looks like and how it's going to be implemented and what the costs associated are.
I'm going to open it
With
up to council to see if they have any questions or comments regarding, our concerns with the roadside trees. The Director of Public Works seems to be in favor of, more funding, so I'll start with Councillor Goida.
So I wouldn't be opposed to putting a line item, I guess, in the budget to address the concern, but to just put a generic number in there, I think I would have no idea what that number should or could be. I think if that's something that we're going to consider doing, that perhaps we should get maybe a report from staff as to, I guess similar to what you're saying in asset management, sort of current condition of the state of these trees. I would suspect that as we continue along this path of global warming and these crazy storms that we seem to be getting on an ongoing basis, that this it will be more of an issue as we move into the future with windstorms, ice storms, things like that, creating public hazard. And so I do think it's something worthwhile looking at, but without knowing the particulars, I think it would be really difficult to just arbitrarily put a number into the budget.
Councillor Willis?
Yes, is there any way of doing a tree inventory? Do we have one that sort of says we got so many trees on this side road? This is Director.
No, we don't.
That would be the first step, is to go up and down each road and everything like that. What would be required to have somebody do that? Like, would it be you can get a forestry student to do that and travel for a summer job type of thing, get an assessment? Is that?
That would be one option to do that as well, yeah. It'd be very time consuming for sure.
I agree with to always to plan before do type of thing. Understand what your problem is and then do it type of thing. That's my thoughts.
Okay. Councillor Roth?
Well, I agree that I think our trees are a real problem out there. I have trouble with this one in the asset management plan about subdivision trees. I can't see that they're a great danger. Are they a great danger?
Not yet.
No, but they're never going to get, I don't think, quite as big as some of the trees we have out there.
Oh, no, they won't.
And if there's a problem with one, cut it down, plant a new one. I just don't get that line. That really blows me away. I'd rather see that $20,000 spent on trees along our township roads, which should also, in my opinion, be in the asset management plan. The roads are our asset, and that's a hindrance to our roads as much as a tree in a subdivision is. So I don't quite understand their reasoning there, but trees in the subdivision don't scare me that much, but the trees out on our side roads, I think we have an ongoing problem, and it's huge. I'm sure you're in agreement that if we increase your budget, but we come to a point where if we're going to increase the budget in one spot, we have to start cutting in another. And perhaps that's one we could do. I think it would be a better deliverance of service levels than subdivision trees. The other one we could maybe look at is sidewalk clearing and pass a bylaw that we're not going to do that. That's another $20,000. Again, I think that would be better spent cutting down dangerous trees along our roads. But that's just food for thought.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes, thank you. I had made myself a note regarding the trees and as they're described in the asset management plan. And I share Councillor Roth's concerns regarding the variety and of the trees that are in there maybe were chosen to be of a certain size. Some of them may eventually get to be as big as it's dangerous, but I questioned why only those trees. Why not the bigger, more dangerous trees on some other roads? At the same time, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality towards this. But I hear we're getting behind on tree control, I guess. That's because I had similar comments when I was out campaigning, and I've had phone calls over the years about it. But if we're getting behind and we're looking at putting trees in our asset management plan, maybe that's where we need to look at it to protect the safety of our roads for the traveling public. Because a tree falling on a road can be just as dangerous, so whether it's a subdivision or township road of a higher speed limit, so. I think the way to address this would be through the asset management plan.
Okay, Madam CEO.
If I may, and Mary can correct me if I'm wrong, and perhaps the consultants can confirm the reason it's not in your asset management plan, because it's not part of our program right now, and we do not have an inventory of what we have. That's fundamentally why it's not in your asset management plan. So as Councillor Sapoulis indicated earlier, the first step would be to have an inventory, have the data in terms of what we do have, and then you're able to quantify the work that needs to be done.
Could I have a question on,
Sure,
follow-up question on
Councillor
that then? Would this fall under the category of, one of the new things that we have to have is, and I think I saw it in the budget somewhere, is a tree canopy policy? Yeah. I mean, is that a different thing as well?
The tree canopy policy, yeah, there's a requirement for municipalities to have a tree canopy policy. I don't think it falls quite under that, Councillor Bomer, because I think that has to do with protecting or making a determination on what your tree canopy coverage would
Right.
be. However, I think it's a separate issue, but it's a good point. Then we would actually have more information in terms of what we actually have in the township.
Got one quick question for the Director of Public Works. Do we need an inventory of the trees, or do you just need to come and say, I need 10 days with a bucket truck company at $1,800 a day, that's $18,000, and then you manage the trees yourself, or the person that replaces you? Do we have to have each tree inventoried? I mean, you're driving around the township daily. I mean, I think you have a pretty good idea of where the dead trees are. You need to spend the money on the consultant to come tell you trees are dead where you already know they're dead?
Yeah, right.
In my opinion, no, we
Good.
don't. I mean, an inventory, I don't know what you're gonna get out of an inventory until at the end it's gonna tell you got 10,000 trees. But again, to bring somebody in to cut them, it's gonna be, you're bringing in the guys that are the experts, right? I mean, we're not tree experts. We can tell a dead tree from a live tree, that's no question, but to the severity, does it need to come down now, or does the next one need to come down? And those are the guys that are cutting. I mean, they're arborists, they're the ones that make that decision. Outside,
Who's on scene? The guys we hire,
That's-
they make that
that's-
scene as they drive down the road.
that's correct. I mean, we'll pick a road, we'll pick a section of road, or right now, we pick 2 trees over here, 2 over here, 2 over here, because we've deemed them that they need to come down, right, just for safety aspects. And when they're there, they'll say, well, that one needs to go, and that one needs to go, and they're right there, so we take them down anyways, type of deal. So it's kind of just get them in and let them go.
So it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, my statement wasn't to take an entire inventory of the trees, to take an inventory of the trees that are dead and rate them as a category. Like somebody would rate them, say, gotta come down now, come down next year, come down 2 years' time. I think that's important. You have a plan of what you plan to do, and then execute the plan, and you can budget your dollars accordingly. I understand that you've got budget money here to be reactive. In other words, there's something's happened, you go in there and do it type of thing. So my attitude is, let's understand what we got, and let's plan it out and do it properly, and then put it in our program, our asset management plan at that time.
Okay, any questions or comments on that? Councillor Bulmer?
I guess, if I paraphrase what I heard from our Public Works Department, though, is the plan is working, but we may be falling a bit behind it. I'm not sure of the value, well, I guess we can have that discussion in the future about the plan of grading trees. I guess when a tree is dead, it's dead, and we'll take care of it. I'm starting to sound more and more like it's not broken, let's not try to fix it, but.
Councillor Gwynn?
I think part of perhaps what Councillor Sapoulis may be alluding to is the idea of risk management that they talk about in asset management, in terms of, you're right, when a tree's dead, it's dead, but if it's not harming anybody, then it doesn't necessarily need to come down, whereas if it's going to come down and fall on a building or a roadway, then it's more of a priority, and I think, if I'm correct, that's...
Perfect. The category rating would be the severity, it's going to come down any day type of thing, and it's going to do this and this, let's take it down now before it comes down on its own.
Makes sense.
The MCU?
Yeah, as council will recall, you as well, I think it was discussed perhaps during my review, one of the items has to do with doing the risk management within the departments. And council identified that they wanted to do it and start with Public Works. And so as part of that process with working with Frank Callum, certainly I'll raise this issue with them, and perhaps then maybe they can assist us in terms of what our first steps should be. And certainly we'll bring that information back to council.
Great. I think that'd be great. Just, at least we're getting the ball rolling and start off. Any other questions or comments? Okay, good. All right. So, hope I didn't lose my page.
Right.
Recreation committees on page 387. Starting, any questions or comments? Okay. Nothing. Oh, I just lost my page. Okay, source water protection is next. I think I got it back. Any questions or comments on source water protection? Okay.
Next, we can just go to the actual report.
All right. Schedule C, start with them. Is that what you're talking about?
Or no, back to the report. I think
Oh,
the members of council may just have questions about Mary's summary.
Visual C is a summary of what we just saw.
All right, so we're going to see Mary's summary. Is there any what page? Oh, go ahead, Mary.
Sorry. Do you guys want me to do similar to last time where we go page by page, and if you have any questions, I can address them?
I'm okay with that, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
One, if we could, and identify which item we're talking about. Remember last time we
Yes.
did 1, 2, 3, that'd be great. Then
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. So just the first page just has a couple recommendations. They're discussed throughout the report, and just the purpose of the report and the background. Basically what was provided at the last budget meeting. Oh, sorry, I can let you know what page we're on. We're on page 346 of 499. So the second page of the report, again, discusses what was presented at the last meeting, the tax levy and what the impact was for the median typical single-family detached dwelling. And then now I'll just go through each of the items that have changed from the last meeting in the current budget that's been provided. So item number 1 is just the cost of living adjustment. So that's been included in the budget model. And just raise your hand if you have any questions. So item number 2 is just some changes in memberships and subscriptions, just based on recent invoices that we received for 2019 memberships and subscriptions. Item number 3 is the operating carry-forward discretionary reserve, and utilizing that reserve for the community improvement plan project, just based on grant funding that we received from the County of Wellington and the Rural Economic Development Program. So I've just added 7,500, so for the CIP grant program, $7,500 is the expense item, and the revenue item, it's being funded from an operating carry-forward reserve, just based on an item that was previously budgeted in a previous budget. So if anyone has any questions, happy to answer. Item number 4 is the grants that were approved by council at the last meeting, and those have been incorporated in the budget. Item number 5 is the base budget increases.
Hang on one second.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Director.
Just want to get
Councillor Bummer?
caught up to speed with the grant. I think I got a note there.
We're on page 349.
Almost there. Almost. Chat amongst yourselves. No, I didn't have a note there. Thank you. Okay.
No problem. Okay, so now we're on item number 5. Item number 5 is just the base budget increases that were approved at the last meeting. Item number 6 is the gravel maintenance, the $3,000 increase due to the increased environmental fee. And I just wanted to clarify, the report actually says that even with the increased environmental fee, the current contractors 4% lower than the tender submission. That's what the report indicates. But I just spoke to the Director of Public Works, and it's actually 8% lower.
Okay.
I would just-
Sorry, Councillor Bulmer.
Councillor Bulmer?
Perhaps, I know the mayor had an interesting conversation with the Ontario Sand and Stone Association at the conference regarding this.
I did, and they were surprised to hear that the environmental fee had been placed on there. And they asked me for, you know, if they qualified it. And I said I didn't have that information and the percentage increase, you know, but now it's, you know, 8% lower cost than the tender. But I don't know if costs have come down since this went to tender. But OSS&G was going to look into it for us. But I mean, I don't want them to, I don't want our costs to go up 8% to save, you know, the $3,000.
Don, did you want to?
Yeah, discussions I've had with a couple of the aggregate suppliers in the last couple of weeks is that they all have an environmental fee, and right now it seems to range anywhere from $1 to $1.50 a ton. That seems to be the going rate on this. So like the Director of Finance said, even with this increase, we're still at 8% lower price than the second bid to the contract.
Yeah, so we don't want to squawk too much.
But it was interesting to find
Yeah.
out from the association that this is not saying that there's no regulatory requirement. This is a producer-driven
Right.
fee.
Yeah.
Just a question for our Chief Financial Officer. Does the 3,000 then stand the increase as a result of the 8%?
Yeah, so the 3,000 was included in the last budget prepared, and I'm just providing council with an update because they requested further information as to looking at other vendors to provide it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Okay. So item number 7 is the phase-in costs associated with the Cambridge Fire contract. Again, these were included in the last budget package, but I'm just indicating here that we will be phasing it in over a 4-year period in accordance with council's direction from the last meeting.
I have a comment about that. So phasing in a quarter of 34,450 or 34,450 each year additionally?
Yeah, 34,450 each year.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 8 is animal control services, and we've incorporated an additional amount of 8,000 in the operating budget, and Ms. Landry can speak further to that one.
We continue to work at our options.
So I'd like to make a comment on that. With this spill in Mill Creek, the local residents were reaching out, and it was a Waterloo Wildlife Rescue was coming out, and they had an interesting website, and then they linked specific rescues within Ontario for raccoons. And, you know, depending on our costing, this might be an avenue to connect people when they call. This, you know, even have a link on our website, I'm not sure. But you know, what was the initial costing? $40,000 from the city, from Guelph Humane Society?
It's close to that amount.
It was a lot of money, and this might be an alternative option if we don't find a more palatable cost. Just work with them and the local, you know, groups that are rescuing wildlife. Go ahead.
I think they only do wildlife, they wouldn't do stray dogs.
Right, and you know, and then maybe an aspect will be that our direction. I don't know if the Humane Societies will turn away individuals with a dog that they bring in as a stray, versus us providing the service. So. Anyways, that's something we're gonna discuss, but I just saw some options there for different things, and I just wanted to point that out.
I had a question.
Councillor Bulmer?
Yeah. Have we reached out directly to our local kennels to see if they'd be interested in providing this service?
We have established initial contact.
Okay.
So we're reviewing that as an option, seeing what our options are there and just what the response would be. And we're also working with another abutting municipality at this point in time.
And have we considered bundling the kennel service with the dog catcher service to go along with it, so that it's an all-in-one package that they could provide, as opposed to, you know, previously we had it 2 separate things?
Yep, we're considering both options.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm just wondering, so this is an additional $8,000 because the previous amount, I guess the feeling is possibly not enough. Is that correct?
It's an unknown at this.
Okay, and I guess my question is even with adding this $8,000, if the preliminary bid that's come in is at $40,000, are we still going to be $20,000 short?
I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to find an alternative.
Okay, okay. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, back to you, Director of Finance.
Okay, item number 9, just providing an update as it relates to the social media and tourism strategy, and that now we're including costs associated with the production of the monthly Puslinch Community Newsletter, so that's now been incorporated in the budget.
Councillor Bulmer?
Interesting, I had the opportunity to attend a workshop at the conference about, filling in the gap and using social media when you're looking to get information out. And the one speaker mentioned how important a newsletter from council is. It was from the municipality, a municipal newsletter with sharing municipal information, provided it's very timely, especially if you haven't got a social media presence. So I can see there is some value in having a municipal newsletter. Where I struggle with this is as they recommended, if it's not timely, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. And I know from some of the groups, I don't know, I've tried to find out from the organizations that use it whether they get see any value in it over and above what they can already do on Facebook and Twitter and whatever else they're using. So it's not a significant amount of money, but I was wondering, could we, I don't know, we're not currently using it to get out timely information because it only comes out once a month. And there's part of me, when I look at what happened with the cannabis meeting, we had to do that quickly. Is there some way we can use this? If we're going to continue with this, I'd like to make sure that it includes information that helps residents get timely information, such as the ability to sign up to our township calendar. I find that's an excellent resource that very few people know about. We have that eSolutions provided a calendar residents can sign up to, and as soon as we put a meeting on the calendar, residents get a notice, get an email. So if we could facilitate this to be more providing municipal information as well. I know there's some in there periodically, but that's my comments on that.
Okay, Councillor Gwyneth?
It's funny that that we're talking about the community newsletter, because I actually myself didn't even know that we had that. And I went online trying to find it so that I could understand what the content of it was. And I couldn't find it. I went on the website and I searched for it and I couldn't find it. And I Googled it and I couldn't find it. So I would have liked to have asked this question prior to now, but with being at Rome, I didn't have the opportunity, and so I am not sure the value of the community newsletter if there's people like myself that don't even know it exists.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Spillis?
Well, we put this community newsletter in to support the Recreation Committee. And I would suggest that if we're sort of having doubts on it, we ask the Recreation Committee what their thoughts are, whether it should be continued or not.
That's fair. Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I got a little confusion about this as well, because the only place I've ever been able to see it is on Puslinch Today.
Yeah.
And it's usually, the month is at least half over before they say it's available.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, is there any way we can monitor this to see how many people are even checking into it? No. I don't know. I think, and I don't know what it's costing. I don't think it's that much, but I know I was in favor of this when it first came out. But if it isn't out in, like Councillor Bono said, in a timely manner, I'm not so sure it's doing a whole lot of good. But anyway.
Okay.
My comments.
Do you have any comments, Madam CEO? So what's the delay in getting it out? Like,
Well, so it's produced once a month. So it goes out once a month, and there's a timeline that was established in the policy, so it's usually made available the first week of the month. As an example, today is January 30th. Deadlines for groups to give submissions is this Friday. And then the person who prepares it will work over the weekend and will provide it to me next week, and it'll be provided online. So we follow the same schedule monthly, and that's the schedule that was established as part of the policy. And that's just the timelines that we chose at that point.
And it's just posted on our website?
So where it's posted on our website is under public notices, and the reason why we post it there is that people who are signed up for notifications on the website, as Councillor Bulmer mentioned, they will get a notice once this is made live on there. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any way to post, I don't know if we want to be posting it twice on the webpage, having, like a little banner that says, Puss Lunch newsletter, and then it's also in the notifications so that when you go to the first page, you can see it?
So we can do that. The only, the banner is dependent on, there's a certain limit to the number of items that are on the banner. So the pending availability on there, we can certainly link it on there as well. The public notices are on the main page as well. Like if you just scroll down below the banner, it is there. Certainly we can link it to the banner as well, pending availability of space, and then we haven't maxed out on the number of items on there.
Do we have enough content to go more frequently than once a month? I know Councillor Bulmer was mentioning that it needs to be timely and frequent, but
I mean, I think that's up to the organizations and to the type of events that they foster. But if you are doing it more than once, then you have to consider the staff commitment, because I'm sending reminders and forwarding, and then you have to consider the pecuniary, the financial implications of the person producing the newsletter.
until we do the review of the, the social media aspect for the 2020 budget, I don't really want to change anything quite yet. I like Councillor Spoulos' recommendation that we bounce it to Rec Committee and see if we can get a report from them, and then maybe go forward if council is okay with that. Really, any questions or comments on that, on allowing the Rec Committee to report back to us?
I would agree. I would just say too, I would agree with that for sure. I think also the website itself is being updated this year. Is that correct? Is that correct? Or is it just being made so that it transfers between desktop and mobile?
So that's one component of it, and upgrading it with some of the recommendations from the logo and brand strategy, like putting some of the branding in it.
And so is there perhaps some opportunities there in terms of reallocating maybe where it shows up, or is that outside of the scope of that?
I think what Nina's recommended, in that it be on the homepage banner when there's room, I think that's, because I think that's the first thing that an individual would see when they go on the website, so.
Okay.
I don't think that this update allows for a whole reworking of the website. I think it's just, yeah.
Well, in any case, I would agree with sending it to the rec for comment.
Any other questions or comments? This might not be the appropriate, I'll talk about it later. I've committed to a quarterly report. Maybe in the mayor's update, I'll talk of it to the public, so. All right, I'll hand it back over to the Director of Finance. We're aligned 10.
Okay, so the next item, item number 10, it's just the Ontario Cannabis Implementation Grant Funding of $10,000 that we know we're going to receive in 2019. And so we've incorporated the grant funding, but also an expense related to that, just because it's one-time funding that we're aware of at this time. So that's incorporated in the budget.
I have a question possibly for the Chief of the Fire Department, if he'd maybe be able to come down quickly. Sorry, again, I'm catch. Thank you, welcome again.
Happy to be here.
So my question is, when we were going through the opt-in or out of cannabis legislation, it was very restrictive on where we could use the funding, but part of it was towards fire responses. And I'm wondering if the fire department can track where there's, you're responding to a medical and there was maybe cannabis use, so then we could direct some of this funding towards the fire department. And do we currently track the cause of the medical, or if that's a possibility, so we can use this funding for budgetary purposes for you guys?
Presently, we do not track that, but if we're directed by council to do so, we can implement that as far as a tracking strategy. However, a lot of times we don't get into the investigation or cause of certain incidents or medical events. That's determined by either EMS or OPP. When it comes to investigating, we investigate fire cause and origin for those type of calls. But if we're directed by council, we can do the best to get that information to you for sure. We also come across a lot of incidents that I'm aware of where there'll be illegal narcotics in personal vehicles. And if you want that captured, we could do so as well.
Well, I'll open up to council. I'm going to ask Madam CEO. I'm not necessarily focusing on the illegal narcotics. It's just specifically the cannabis, because then I see it's an avenue to use this funding, since we don't have direct policing costs and these other things. If we have an avenue to use this and alleviate some of the budget pressures, it's more just focus on the cannabis. And I'll ask Madam CEO and possibly the Director of Finance, how do we have to justify where we split up the funding? Is there strict criteria to?
Well, we're still waiting to understand what the scope is of what you can expense and the scope and the criteria for expensing. So until we have more information come from the province in that regard, it's difficult for us to know what expenses will actually qualify for us. But certainly, I can assure you that we will look at all our options as it relates to having those funds cover the expenses.
That was just an avenue I thought I saw for funding. Sorry.
Yeah, so a lot of it will be like staff time, right? In implementing policies and that. But the reason why I put an offsetting expense in there is because I didn't want it to affect the tax levy component, so, because it's a one-time injection that we're aware of at this time.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you, Chief. I just wanted to see if it was, Councilor Palmer?
Building on your point there, Mr. Mayor, maybe fire prevention might be a place we could assign some of these costs, because some people maybe didn't smoke cigarettes, but now they'll be smoking this, and I seem to recall for years there was lots of fire prevention information about smoking at home, which is one of the few places you're allowed to smoke this stuff. So.
True, and we can target certain public education campaigns to do so on utilizing cannabis safely in your home. Is that what Councillor Palmer is requesting?
That's a way to rationalize the expense or justify.
Yeah.
It's a place where we need some enhanced information and therefore extra expense.
That's a very good idea, thank you.
Yeah, we will look at it definitely corporate-wide, because even if you take it as to the point of the development of the municipal statement policy, there are costs that are going to be associated with that. So we will definitely look at,
We'll use it up.
where we can allocate the expense
I
to.
just saw it as another avenue. I just
Yeah.
wanted to question. Okay.
But we are open to ideas.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Chief Combs.
You're welcome.
Back over to the Director of Finance.
Okay, so item number 11 is just based on the work that we did with the reduced rate policy. There was some direction from council in 2017 as it related to the agreement that we have with the County of Wellington for the Post Lynch Historical Society library lease. And so here there's just some information as it relates to the financial implications associated with this. As you may recall, there's the library cost center, and so that rental costs we pay directly to the County of Wellington for the Post Lynch Historical Society lease. So I'm just reporting back on that, and it's recommended that we consider facilitating this arrangement as part of the township's annual grant application program in 2021.
I had a question.
Councilor Palmer.
Yeah, would it be possible, I know whenever we're reviewing applications, oops. Again, this year, we recognized that some of the larger ones are outside and would, outside the current envelopes. And I know we've often discussed that the envelopes, I think, were envisioned to be that max out at 5,000 for a community grant. And maybe there were other things we might want to tweak about that policy. Could we include a minor update to the policy as part of as well as when we review adding the rental of the library space for the Historical Society? Is it possible to just to make sure it falls in line with what we're trying to do there.
I'll make a comment on that. I have some concerns so you're basically speaking that the policy for the grants needs a bit of a updating housekeeping?
Yeah, because we identified a few concerns this year, some grants that maybe didn't quite fit or maybe did fit, and same thing with the Puslinch Lake, it's 25,000, and this may be the last year for it. And that policy, I think the intention was it maxed out at about 5,000 or 10, whatever we decide the upper limit is, so that all those larger ones are dealt with as under different policies.
Correct.
We have the farm, home and safe, which we've done a couple of years now, and it's not supported by the policy. So I always just like to keep the policy up to date with what we're actually doing. The practices that we're doing are properly reflected in the policy that we're applying. And I'm not talking a complete rewrite, just, if we see a problem with how the policy works, we'll change it, so.
Okay, we'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Goy. So you're just asking for staff to possibly do a policy review? Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm just going to suggest if council's looking at doing a policy review, I do need to put that on your policy review schedule, and you need to review your policy review schedule, because it will then you need to make the decision on whether that's going to take priority over getting something else put in place.
Yes, I understand.
So I'm happy to do that for you, put that on the list so that when you review your policies and your bylaws that you want reviewed for the upcoming year, and when you discuss that on March, I'm happy to put the grant policy update on there for you.
I've had discussions with Madame CEO about the policy as well, and she was going to report back to me on my position. So I would like to see it on there as a possible review. So, Councillor Goyda?
I guess without having that list in front of me, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I think it does need to reflect what we're actually doing. And that was one of my questions when we were going through the grants in our previous meeting, why we're allowing above the amounts which we've set out to be the limit. And so I think that would make things more clear as we go along, deciding on whether we're going to accept the grant or grant the grants, I guess. But if that's at the expense of something more pertinent and more important, I think I need to see that complete list first.
And that's what you'll provide us in March?
Absolutely.
Okay, Councillor.
A question of Councillor Blomberg. What is your concern with respect to the $5,000 amount? Like, I've looked at the grants we've allowed, and I don't see anything over 5,000, with the exception of Puslinch Lake, which we all agreed is an anomaly.
Right, and so when we developed this policy back when, we talked about envelope sizes or trenches or whatever you want to call them for each of these categories, those being under 500, those being between 500 and 3,000, and envisioned that the top end, we had discussions that the top envelope would be for those applications that are from 3,000 to 5,000. And anything over and above 5,000 would be dealt with separately, such as we've held the way Puslinch Lake has been handled. The way the policy currently reads is that Puslinch Lake applications should be handled the same as all the rest. It doesn't say, there's nothing to suggest that those things that are over 5,000 have a separate process. I don't have an issue with those over 5,000. It's just that the policy is open-ended from 3,000 and up. And I think some of the discussions we had before were that these kind of community grants have an upper limit. Anything beyond that, we're talking construction projects, we're talking significant support. And that's the only, that's the one example.
Okay, and I guess I agree with Councillor Goyda. Yeah, sure, let's put it on a list, but if there's something more higher priority, we'll just deal with it.
Councillor Rowe?
It's all about priorities. Get it on the list.
Okay, I think we're good. Back to you, Director, Finance.
Okay, item number 12 is the Recreation Committee just requested some information as it relates to a comparison of 2018 revenues utilizing the per-hour rate versus the resident rate. And so there's just some discussion in there just to address some other questions.
Any questions or comments?
Okay. Item number 13 is just based on a council resolution from the 2017 meeting as it related to the reduced rates policy, and as part of our budget, that a use/cost sharing agreement in 2019 be developed with the Puslinch Tennis Club that would outline responsibilities for court care and maintenance as well as cost sharing. And there's just some financial implications associated with this, as well as what's included in the capital budget and forecast associated with the tennis courts, as well as what's included in the asset management plan as it relates to the tennis courts. So there's information provided there, and it just recommends that we work with that staff work with the Recreation Committee to negotiate an agreement with the Puslinch Tennis Club.
Councillor Bomer?
Yeah, I think it was Councillor Roth made an interesting point regarding this before about, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. We've had an excellent relationship with the tennis club, and, let's not forget the Optimist Club donated those courts in the first place. So I support this fully, just as long as we keep in mind, and I want to make sure the process reflects and respects the highly collaborative and cooperative relationship associated with those courts to date. As long as they understand. Because I haven't heard, what happened with the shed? They were going to build a little shed there, too.
As far as I know, it was shot down by council. Wasn't it?
No, we entered,
Oh, was it?
yeah, there was an agreement allowing them to, right?
Did they ever build it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was not allowed. Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else, any questions or comments? Okay.
Okay, so the next page, 355. So the items are, I've discussed all the items that were included. Now this is just the operating tax levy impacts excluding the building department and where we are tax levy wise based on the items discussed above. And then the next item is updates to the building department proposed budget, and these are described separately because there is no tax levy impact. And so the cost of living adjustment is item number 1. And item number 2 is allocating a portion of the increase in the janitorial services, like the base budget increase that was approved, and allocating a portion of that to the building department. And so here you see what the building department looks like right now. So on the bottom of page 11 is just the capital budget updates. And so there's some information in there as it relates to the pre-budget approval that we received for the planning works for Fox Run Park. And there's been some changes in the capital budget sheet as it relates to Fox Run Park based on our discussions with GM Blue Plan. And there's no tax levy impact associated with the changes. So as I indicated previously, the County of Wellington Trails funding is now currently in the Fox Run Park project. And the soccer fields now has more cash in lieu of parkland funding that's being utilized based on council's direction from the last meeting. So any questions on item number 1? Item number 2 is our estimate that we received from GM Blue Plan for the gravel road study discussed by council at the January 16th meeting. And there's just some information in there as well as their cost estimate of $25,000 for the study.
Okay, I think I have some comments. Do you have any comments from council on that?
Just one, I just want to make sure we have the right staff, consultant staff to undertake the study. If GM Blue Plan has the right staff, great. If not, they should try to get it.
Okay. Is this the one, any other questions or comments before I speak?
We're talking about the contract in GM Blue Plan. We're not on Fox Run Park now, right?
No, this is to prioritize the paving of unpaved roads as established in the asset management plan.
Well, just one comment. As I read this in context with the draft asset management plan and the policies, and the note from Gainsbury Manor sort of pointing out, this does appear to be somewhat of a duplication of what the asset management plan is intended to achieve. But I realize what I do like about this is that it does indicate a direction. But I'm also thinking that perhaps once we get the asset management plan in place and running, it should point us in this direction. And if it doesn't, I think then we should maybe go down this path. But I'm not certain that this is where we need to go this year prior to getting the asset management plan in place and getting the tracking. Because even the asset management plan had recommendations about enhanced tracking of information, which will inform the policy in the plan as to when we pave a gravel road and which gravel roads need to be paved. So that would be my concern. I'm not sure we need this now.
Okay, Councillor Goyda?
Yeah, I guess I've actually been struggling with this a little bit because I do definitely see that there is a bit of an overlap and a duplication of work happening here. However, when I look at the service standard that's currently in the draft form for gravel roads, really how I'm reading it is this service standard is what we're sort of putting in place to keep gravel roads at sort of status quo. And if they don't, if we're grading them too much and if the traffic is too high, then we would consider paving it if and only we have the money to do so. But if that's not happening, then the assumption would be that road would just stay a gravel road. And so I think of that as almost kind of like a reactive way of looking at it. Whereas I think when I'm reading what GM Blue Plan is proposing here, this deals perhaps a little bit more with, I think we were talking about at our last council meeting, where maybe we really do need to start looking at some of these gravel roads and getting some of them paved. And I think perhaps this would address that a little bit more in a more proactive way of determining which roads maybe aren't sufficing as gravel roads and need to be looked at being paved or crushed stone what's the word for it? Tar and chip, thank you. However, I would agree to a certain extent with Councillor Balmer that perhaps I do agree with this and I think we need to do it. However, I think it may make a little bit more sense to allow that asset management plan to take into effect and see how those service standards are working before we kind of implement a duplication of work. And perhaps I'm talking in circles here a little bit, but I'm just trying to kind of differentiate what one is achieving versus the other and how the two fit in and how they're separate.
Councillor Spillis?
I look at this study to do several things. First of all, the current pavement, is there a way we can extend the life of the current pavement? That's one aspect of it. In other words, defer rebuilding the road as long as possible if you can do and employ techniques to extend the life of pavement. With respect to gravel roads, is tar chip the only answer? Is there something else out there? So that's what I'm looking at as well. There might be other opportunities there. The other aspect of it is if we don't do something like this, we're going to be a year behind the 8 ball, because what's going to happen is you're going to invoke the asset management plan next year, and you're not going to have a plan until you're going to end up doing something like this in another year's time in any event, because all the asset management plan is going to do is, yeah, this is the criteria, yeah, okay, it's happening, that's good. So you can be reactive or proactive. This is a proactive approach to get everything laid up, understand what's there, what the dollars are, and then systematically get into it rather than reacting and saying, well, okay, let's go through, let's pave a unpaved road. You don't know if it's the right road. You don't know if it's going to be applicable for paving or not. And you don't know if tar and chip is the right answer for that road. So I see this as study to make sure we know where we're going before we embark on the journey of paving roads.
Okay. Councillor Rowe?
Yeah, this is a tough one, simply because my big fear here is we spend $25,000 and we may not know a whole lot more after we're all done. We may or we may not, but I'm still of the opinion that we have to take a stance and say we're going to do a gravel road every year, or every 2 years, or every 3 years, or at least have some kind of plan in place. And then maybe we could use this type of funding to concentrate on a road and see what it's going to involve to pave that road. I think township staff are on these roads every day, and I think they can recommend better than a consultant which road should be paved first. Maybe wrong there. I'd have to direct that question to the Director of Public Works. I certainly don't want to choose them. I don't know. I'm not sure it's the right time to do this, and I see what Councillor Sapoulis is saying by putting us another year behind, and that's why I think at some point, Township Council has to make a commitment to do a gravel road, and I don't know if anyone's up for that commitment.
Okay, thanks. So we're kind of talking about two different things. We're talking about paving roads because they meet the criteria, and then Councillor Roth is talking about we're paving roads just to pave them.
No,
No, I'm not disagreeing with you, Councillor Roth. I agree that we need to choose roads, but, so if you're saying that it meets the criteria, but that's my concern, the asset management plan, there's a traffic count study in there, so it's gonna give you whether the gravel road has 400 or more cars per day. It's going to, the Director of Public Works is gonna say over two consecutive periods that it was graded in excess. So these are gonna be the benchmarks that are gonna tell us to pave it, but then we're gonna do another study that tells us when to pave it. So that's my concern, and, it is still a draft of the asset management plan, and I'm concerned that it's duplication at this point. Until we see how the asset management plan is working, this may come after, and I'll ask the Director of Public Works, in the draft form of the asset management plan, is it providing you, along with your local knowledge, sufficient data to determine which roads should be paved?
I think the asset management plan is gonna provide a fair trigger base instead of putting emotions into what should be done first, right? This is gonna be fair across the board on it, and it's gonna tell you which ones has hit that threshold, and then just start, exploring what's needed to get that gravel road to a paved surface or a tar and chip surface. At this point, to me, there's two options. You either go with the asset management plan, which provide fair triggers, or you go the other way and just say, we're gonna pave a gravel road every second year, or the case, and prioritize a list. What's gonna be the benefit to not only the public, but to maintenance. A good example to that is, if you look at Carter or Cooks Mill and Farnham, they're the farthest away for us for maintenance, right? So, there's those kind of aspects to look at. It's all gonna come down to if you're gonna use trigger points or you're gonna make a commitment to do something on a permanent basis going forward.
Is there anything in the asset management plan for reconstruction to a gravel road? So say, the complaints we've had about the west, not Boundary Road, but Concession 11, is there anything written about reconstructing it back to a gravel road? So then if funding comes down through the feds or the province, that it's ready to go. Because right now, I would assume Concession 11, the base is not doing so well.
Yeah, I would suggest that there's going to be investigation work required on every gravel road.
Okay. Okay, so I don't know if we have a direction to council as to whether we're going to go forward with this. Is there any other questions or comments? I was supposed to start with Councillor Balmer.
Thank you. I think what I heard from Councillor Sapoulis is part of the concern is it may never get done under the way the asset management plan is currently worded, the policy regarding gravel roads. So perhaps many of those concerns could be addressed by refining the policy in the asset management plan, the trigger may be able to reflect closer to what we're trying to achieve through Gansey and Manero, through that other direction. Maybe somewhere the solution is a combination of the two, but built into the asset management plan so that there is specific work that's triggered right away, that an investigation is triggered immediately when you hit these things, these targets are hit, certain work starts.
I think that's, to me, that just seems like it's complicating it more. I'm not sure
Okay.
if there's,
I think it's just hard to know because we don't know.
don't know.
We don't know at this point in time how, with this service standard,
If it's going to work.
how many roads is that going to apply to? I don't know if maybe the Director of Public Works has any kind of idea, based on 6 gradings per year and the traffic count and the, I forget off the top of my head what other things are in there, but is it likely that we're going to have a lot of roads meeting that threshold?
At this particular time, I would say no, there is not. I'd say for those trigger points, the prime candidate will be Concession South, and probably CalFAS. Based on
interest.
grading practices and previous traffic that have been done on those roads.
Madam CEO.
I just have a question. Don, I know that one of the service level triggers is that the traffic volume exceeds 400 vehicles. We don't take traffic volume studies on our roads proactively. I mean, on every road on a routine period, right?
No, that's correct. That would be done in the next traffic study.
Okay, and that's
That's been recommended as part of the asset management
That's what I
plan.
was mentioning.
That's coming, yeah.
Yeah. What was it,
So it's-
2020 or 2022? I can't remember offhand right now, the traffic study. I think, Councillor Spillis?
Yeah, well, the other aspect that's not noted here was the impact to the residents, and that to me is a driver that should be considered. So, for instance, if you have a unpaved road with 20 homes on it, very close to the road, you're going to have an impact. If you're going to have a unpaved road with a couple of farms on it, you're not going to have as big of impact. So that, to me, is an issue that's not covered off in the asset management plan. And something like that should be covered off in this particular study. So you've got the environmental impact to the homeowner as well as the hard numbers type of thing. So there is something that has to be done to bridge the gap between what's a hard number and what the impact is to the community.
Councillor Bulmer?
And thank you for raising that point, because that's the kind of thing I was talking about that is not currently in the asset management plan policy regarding the triggers for paving gravel roads. But since traffic is it's a result of growth, I think what I'm hearing from you is that you'd like to have some, maybe it's a reasonable thing to have an additional trigger in the asset management plan that relates to the number of houses on the road. Because you could have a road that a lot of the gravel is coming from, as you say, people don't live there, and all the houses are far back and it gets paved, where you could have another gravel road with lower traffic counts, perhaps, a lot more local houses and a lot more local impact. So perhaps there's a way we can move that test into the current asset management policy regarding triggering in terms of, the number of houses on a given stretch of road.
I don't know if the asset management plan looks at qualitative things. So my experience is I look at quantitative things.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting. Counting the number of homes on a length of road is a quantitative.
It is, but they're a kilometer away from the road.
Oh, I see.
Then there's a big difference between something that homeowners 100 yards away versus a kilometer down the road.
Okay.
Did you want to speak?
I have one more
Councillor
just
Spillis, or Swaydown?
sort of question. So again, and I'm sorry I keep flip-flopping between the level of service policy and the asset management, but I'm just trying to really separate these two. But one of the things as one of our service standards is that that an inspection of the gravel base has been completed by a qualified engineer and confirms that the road base can support a hardtop service without additional construction required. So I guess maybe one of my questions would be, so what if, all these other things are happening, but the road base isn't sufficient to support a hardtop surface? I guess what happens then? Do we just keep carrying on grading it, putting more gravel on it, or is that then a new trigger point that says, well, now we have to? And I think maybe that kind of falls into this study a little bit more in terms of, well, what are the gravel bases of the roads, and what roads can support paving and which roads can't? And maybe there's gravel roads that don't necessarily need to be paved. They just need to be reconstructed, as you said, as new, better gravel roads. But I don't necessarily think that those components are being addressed in the asset management, whereas in this other, in GM Blue Plan's proposal, I would think that's something that would be addressed.
Councillor Bulmer.
Thank you. Again, that's exactly to what I'm trying to speak of. If this is we can change those trigger points in the asset management plan to achieve that same end, so that if we get to that point, instead of what the language you saw there, it could otherwise then trigger when you get those traffic counts and the grading. At that point, we study the base of that road, determine if it's capable, and if not, it could be upgraded to support it. It's a matter of modifying the asset management policies to match the objectives that we're trying to achieve in another policy. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible.
Director of Public Works, would you be able to answer the question, is there any gravel roads in the township that the base is sufficient for hard topping, in your opinion, currently?
Full length of road? No.
So generally, any road that we're going to hard top is going to need reconstruction as well,
To a
certain degree, right?
More or less, yeah.
Right, they're all old, and so, I guess what I'm looking for, is there a motion here to remove this? Or are we letting it go? If there isn't a motion to possibly remove this from the budget, then we're going to have to move on here. There's a lot of ifs, and then we can maybe, Councillor Bulmer?
Well, perhaps maybe a broader and gentler motion would be, I'd like to remove it. I'd move that we remove it from this year's budget, but I'd like to see if we can address the concerns that were raised by both Councillor Sapoulis and Councillor Goyda. If we can use this as a guide to amend or word the final
Asset management plan.
policy in the asset management plan to achieve similar goals.
Okay, so defer it for a year and amend the asset management plan to
To address some of these
address
similar
some of
goals.
their concerns?
Yeah.
Is there, do you want to have some discussion? Well, I need a seconder to discuss that. Anyone going to second it? I don't think I can second it.
I'll second so we
Okay.
can talk about it.
Yeah, so Councillor Goyda. So what we're discussing now is possibly deferring this consultant for a year, and then we're going to work on the wording in the asset management plan to address the concerns of how these roads qualify for upgrade. I'll go to Councillor Goyda. And we'll just, sorry, I'm going to cut you off.
I
just
have no
need- I
com-
need
yeah.
everybody to be fairly concise. We have the delegate coming in.
Sorry,
2 minutes, and
I
we
have
need
no
to
comment. I'm okay.
Councillor Spillis?
I will not support it.
Okay, Councillor Roth?
I'm just reading over here all the scope of this $25,000. God, I hate to move backwards too. I'm not going to support it.
Okay, Councillor Palmer? It's your motion?
Yeah, it's my I think we can achieve similar goals through the asset management plan, so at this point, I wouldn't want to put duplicate money out or spend money twice for something that we might be able to achieve under another program. And if we get the targets the way we're comfortable with and the additional monitoring that is being proposed in the asset management plan, I think we could achieve the same goals.
Okay, so we've heard from everybody. I'm going to call a vote on it.
Can I have a recorded vote?
Sure.
Councillor Sapoulis?
I do not support the motion.
Okay, so it would be all those in favor. So Councillor Sapoulis, no, you're not in support? Or you are?
Motion of removing it from the budget.
So no. Counselor Goida?
No.
Counselor Bulmer?
Yes.
Counselor Rose? Mayor Sealy?
Yes. So it's carried. Okay.
It's carried, it
Stays
stays
as is.
in.
Stays in.
Or, sorry, I guess the vote carried, but it was declined, I guess.
So the 25,000 is in,
Yeah.
just so that everyone's clear.
Sorry about that. That was
That's okay.
proper terminology. Okay, Director of Finance?
Okay, so now the next page, page 358 of 499, just discusses what the capital tax levy impacts are, the total financial implications as it relates to the tax levy. So we're comparing 2018 approved budget to 2019 proposed budget. Page 359 is the current tax levy impact on the median typical single-family detached dwelling. So right now, it's at 1.8% based on the proposed budget. And the next item just includes an analysis as to how much additional tax levy would get us to the 2% impact versus 2.5% impact versus 3% impact.
Okay, thank you. So is the 1.8 still accurate with any changes we've made?
There have been no
No
changes
changes?
made, so, yep, it's still accurate.
All right, so if there's any questions or comments before I read this last? No? Councillor Schools?
I'd like to suggest we put a additional 1% tax levy on because a couple of uncertainties. First of all, the funding from the province, staff took a guesstimate using last year's numbers, and if that goes up, then we're going to need the money. So there were a couple other uncertainties in the budget that escapes me right now. I can't remember what they are, but they were also uncertainties that we may want to make sure we have a nice cushion in there as well. So, so the asset management plan. We're going to be implementing asset management rather than having a big hit all at once whenever we implement it. At least we put this money in the budget and it's in the base for when we start implementing the asset management plan.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
You're saying you're,
Need a seconder before we discuss it.
okay, I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Goida?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correct. You're saying an additional 1% on top of the 1.8 or on top of the additional tax levies that are being suggested here up to 3?
No, it's on top of the 1.8.
Okay, so you would suggest 2.8?
And remember, the 1.8 is strictly ours. The Wellington County has not been factored in.
Correct.
And if I may ask the question of the Chief Financial Officer, knowing what you know now from Wellington County, what would be the percent change from the 1.8 if they implement what they say they're going to implement?
It's approximately 1.5%. I'm incorporating the education at the same rate as last year, and the county based on their current preliminary rate. And our rate at 1.8, the blended impact is approximately 1.5%.
So what I'm saying, you go from 1.5 to 2.5, basically.
Okay.
I would definitely support that, and I would even maybe further say that perhaps we should go to the 3% that is being outlined here in order to put as much as possible towards the capital, towards the asset management, because in looking at those numbers, that's going to be quite daunting over the next little while, and so I would definitely support the 2.8 and even say maybe we should put it right to 3.
Are you asking for an amendment to his motion, or?
I think I'd like to let the discussion go around.
Councillor Rowe?
So you're suggesting add another 1%?
To the blended,
Right.
to what we have now at it would be 2.8, but
Right.
and just bearing in mind the 1.8 translates to a 1.47, and it won't be exactly a 1% hike, it will be maybe 2.3, 2.4 when you're all done.
But then over and above that, we will have whatever we decide on to tack on for the asset management, correct?
Yes.
The transfer of the money from what we discussed previously, yes.
Yeah, so that's based on the 1.8, you're suggesting on the 1%, that'd be 2.8, and then if we went 3% with the asset management, it'd be 5.8.
Well, we haven't gotten
No, I
that, we
know.
haven't got that way.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, potentially, yes.
Okay.
Potentially, yes, but I think we can probably soften the blow in the first couple of years and still
Yeah.
not necessarily
What-
go to 3%.
What he's proposing is that by putting the 1% on, if we decide that we need 3% for asset management, that it translates into 2, because we put one.
the first year.
We put, for the first year, because we put a percent on this year. So it's kind of juggling money. around.
Sorry, I think I've misunderstood. What I was saying is a total of 3%. And so
With the asset management plan in?
yes.
Yeah, we're not discussing asset
Okay,
management.
okay. So I take what I said back.
So what we're discussing is an additional 1% and to this budget, and then the idea is that, when we discuss the asset management plan, it can offset that initial year tax impact. Is that correct?
But it's in the base already,
Yeah.
so instead of being 3% consistently, it's 2% now consistently.
Yeah.
So you soften the blow, is that correct?
First year.
Okay, so our capital budget and forecast currently is not broken down as it relates to asset replacement versus like new projects versus studies. And so as the asset management plan is completed, that analysis can be done more as part of the 2020 budget. So I think,
Well, I would suggest that we just allocate that 1% to the asset management plan now, if that's the case, if that's what you need as a motion.
So it's going to reserves or?
It's going into reserves and it's there, so instead of heading 2%, 3% every year, it's 2% now. That's the way I would read the numbers, if I'm correct in that assumption.
Madame
So
Seguin?
right now, we're going to note that the motion on the floor is for 1% that's dedicated to asset management before you actually complete your asset management review. And then in your next budget cycle, if you decide to raise it, then you can raise that percentage. Okay.
Councillor Roth?
I had it.
I'm in favor of that.
Councillor Bulmer?
Yeah, I support it. But just to clarify, so the plan is not to introduce the asset management plan into this year's budget, the cost, it's to be 2020's budget will be the first one that sees the implication, the start of the asset management plan.
Well, essentially, you're starting at 1% right now, but you're going to consider the complete impact of the total asset management plan during your next budget review.
And what he's mentioning is if whatever we decide about the asset management plan, we're not going to go back and put it on, it's going to go on in 2020 going forward. Is that correct, Councillor Bulmer? Is what your intention was?
No, I know, I just want to make sure I understand that we're looking at, right now, the asset management plan is talking 3% on top of whatever we put now, an additional 3%, but if we put 1% onto our levy, that means the first year of the asset management could be 2 as opposed to an additional 3.
Or exactly,
Or
or
it could-
a staff works out the.
We're creating a step.
Yeah, or a staff works out the peaks and valleys, so you
Yes.
can argue it'll reduce the amount of money you have to borrow.
And I support that.
Okay.
Especially when I think of, if we had a total of a 3% increase and this is 3% on our portion of the tax bill, that really translates into 0.5% overall on the tax bill, because we represent 17%. So
Okay,
I could support the 2.8. Yeah, no
all right.
problem.
And Councillor Goyda, you're.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
so
I
All in
understand.
favor of Councillor Spoulos' motion? Carried. All right, so I can read this one? All right, moved by Councillor Roth, seconded by Councillor Bulmer, that report financial 2019-007 regarding the 29 capital and operating budget update be received, and that staff work with the Recreation Committee to negotiate a use/cost sharing agreement with the Pleasant Tennis Club that outlines responsibilities for court, care, and maintenance, as well as cost sharing, and that the township's agreement with the County of Wellington for the Pleasant Historical Society be facilitated as part of the township's 2021 grant application program. All in favor? Carried. Okay, next we're going to deal with the delegate, but we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah, you want to call them up and we'll just reconvene in 2 minutes?
Sure. Can I just invite you down?
Set up.
You guys come down, set up, we'll reconvene and wash and break in some water. I'd like to welcome you again for your asset
Thank you.
management presentation. I'll hand over the floor to yourself.
Thank you. Just so you may or may not remember, my name's Wayne Wood. I'm with Urban Environmental Management. With me is John Murphy from DFA. He is our financial advisor on this project and has an extensive municipal background, as I do. So our primary reason, and I promise to be short, apologize for the last time, but our primary reason for being here today is to talk about a public meeting that will be held next week. What I wanted to cover today was very quickly some of the things that we'll be talking about in terms of today, and I'm sure it can go much broader, but our interest is service level policies, the capital budget, that is a product of a review of service level policies, and a review of your data in regard to asset condition. John will talk about financial strategy, and we obviously will have questions. So we all know that we're bound by Ontario Regulation 588-17, which is asset management. What is really important is that a component of the regulation is that there has to be some type of public review in terms of the service level policies. And obviously people are going to want to know what's the impact of those service level policies upon our expenditures or on the budget. And then how, the obvious question is, how are we going to fund those? And give people the opportunity to ask us questions. So next week we will be doing a presentation, February 5th, beginning at 6 p.m. And we wanted to show you some of the slides. These are very, very close to what's in your package. The only difference is that, and I know a couple of councillors sent in, there was a page misnumbered when we sent it out last week in reference example 13 to 15. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, but simply because of your restraints, and I want John to get at it in terms of what his comments will be. But it's obvious, I think, that we've got to at least tell the public what asset management is. And the fact that we've created an asset register. So we've taken all the available information in regard to your assets and completed a register, which really is a large database that is age, condition, remaining life, replacement value, probability of failure, and in some cases, consequence of failure. And I'll show this slide to the public. So what I'm reviewing right now are the slides you will see at the public meeting. And these are a list of all of your assets that we've identified along with staff. And then we'll talk about service lives. And we're going to go through 13, and we certainly can go through them today, but I was suggesting we can come back to these if you have the time. But there is 13 slides that deal with your assets, such as bridges and culverts, buildings and facilities, fire equipment, fire reservoirs, works buildings, parks and rec buildings, gravel roads as a separate entity, and hard road services. And what we ultimately, and signs and sidewalks, stormwater management, ponds, street trees, which are one of the smaller inventories. And what we will show the public is this slide, which basically is the 10-year capital needs to support existing infrastructure. And what we have done, and before I move on, I want you to understand, is we've taken a lot of the studies. Most of the numbers that were generated begin with studies that you've completed, whether it's road needs studies, bridge studies, stormwater management pond studies, et cetera, et cetera. And those that we had to estimate in terms of replacement costs are very, very small, less than 10% of the total value of your assets. Certainly, Don assisted us in one or two instances, including a visit to some of the sports facilities, which did not have good values in terms of their assets, nor did it have good condition data. But roads generally, sewers, storm sewers, bridges and culverts, all have relatively good data in terms of replacement value, except for gravel roads. Gravel roads were never part of your road study. And along with estimates of road reconstruction costs that were provided by Push Lynch in the local vicinity, we've managed to produce the replacement costs or the rehabilitation costs. We also want to indicate that in some instances, we're not talking replacement, we're talking rehabilitation. So really what that did was produce a capital plan with obviously some significant annual expenditures totaling about $17.5 million over the 10-year period. So I'm now going to ask John to speak to the finance plan, the finance strategy.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. I've got about 5 slides. Obviously, we have the requirements of the regulation in respect to the financial strategy. One is to identify the cost, which Wayne just indicated, about $17.5 million in capital works over the next 10 years. Identify annual funding projected to be available. We've worked with staff to... We worked with staff... Is that on? Okay. And identify the various sources that are currently available, the grants, the aggregate levy, some development charges, and your capital levy. That's what I call it, that you're currently providing in your operating budget. Look at options. We have 3 options which we considered, or I put together, and identify any funding shortfall, explain how the funding shortfall and associated risks are addressed. There are no funding shortfalls. We have the debt, which is used to underwrite the cost of the capital program where insufficient funds are available in the reserve. Now, we have the financial strategies, a combination of pay-as-you-go and debt throughout the 3 options and throughout the forecast period. Now, each option identifies different levels of capital levy available. So I heard you talking in your budget deliberations in regards to the 1% impact on the operating budget as a result of capital needs. Here we have 3 options: a 1% tax impact, 2% tax impact, and a 3% tax impact. And each option gives a different level of tax-supported funding over the forecast period. Now, overlaid on those financing options are financial policy considerations in regards to a level of sustainable level of funding, target reserve balances, and of course the level of debt that municipality is willing to incur. And here we have the 3 financial policy considerations. We identified a target funding level, or which we call sustainable level of funding, which is equivalent to 2% of the capital replacement costs. That is, well, it varies by year, because the way we have it is we have an estimate of your current replacement values of the assets contained in your asset registry. And over the forecast period, we assume there's a slight inflation on those assets. So the target funding level gradually increases. And we believe that level of funding would provide a sustainable funding source for your asset management plan over the long term. Now, we also have sort of policy considerations in regards to a reserve target balance. Currently, you have about $2.3 million. And this is based on a review of your discretionary reserves that have sort of a purpose related to asset management planning, whether it's asset rehabilitation, replacement. And that's actually pretty good. It's above the minimum target level, which we have it based on 10% being the minimum, 20%, 10% of the 10-year capital plan. Now, it's 10% of the inflated. Right now, the $17.5 million 10-year capital program that Wayne identified is in today's dollars, but as we know, inflation is always there. So we have this range where it's desirable to have a reserve balance, number one, to address any unforeseen needs. It's really to address risk. And now, the debt capacity restriction, right now I understand you're debt-free, and therefore there are no debt servicing costs in 2019. With regards to funding the capital program as presented, there are years where you will have insufficient funds available in the reserve to underwrite that capital program. So we've assumed that you will look to long-term debt to underwrite the difference. And that's, not unusual. And once you underwrite debt, that debt has to be serviced from future capital levies. But under the three options, what you have is a funding strategy where the difference is between, or among the three strategies, is the level of tax-supported funding or financing and the level of debt needed to fund each of the consecutive years. So what we have is two charts, one showing the timing of which you achieve the target level of funding, and obviously the option 3, which is the 3% option, gets you to that target level of funding the earliest. Option 2, which is a 2%, gets you to that sustainable level of funding later on in the 10-year forecast. But option 1, you're not going to get there until sometime beyond 2028. Now, in regards to the level of debt which you will incur under the three options, and I'll go back to the debt capacity restrictions. The province allows municipalities to borrow whereby their debt servicing does not exceed an amount that's equivalent to 25% of their net revenue or its own source revenue. Pretty much, should you get anywhere near that, you're in trouble. A lot of municipalities set self-imposed limits at a lot less, and 10% is sort of common among those restrictions. So the option 1, you can see that you'd be borrowing to fund the asset management plan capital program such that you will actually exceed that self-imposed 10% restriction by 2028. So obviously that's an option I didn't recommend. Option 2, you're about 2/3 to that limit. So 6.9% of your own source revenues would be going towards servicing debt for past capital works. And option 3, you're at 5.5%, or it's 55% of the 10% target, which is not too bad, but you can see you're going from 0 to 5.5% of your own source revenues are going to service past decisions, which is your asset management capital works in that over that 10-year period. So I'm recommending the 3%. Now, based on what I just heard, you're looking at a 1% in 2019, which, well, your council, that's your decision. But I think what that means is that I probably should go and modify my recommendations to reflect 1% in 2019 and then adjust the future years to be reflective of decisions that are made by, pretty much, this is based on the best information available at the time. We now have better information that 1% is 2019 and make those adjustments going forward.
There, just so that you're aware, there will be another one-time injection of surplus from this past year, for which we set aside funds that we won't be able to use. So Mary will provide you with that information. So if you're able just to incorporate that, then there won't be anything else to incorporate.
Okay, no,
moving forward. That
talk
would
to
be
Mary,
great.
get
Yeah.
update information and modify, and we'll talk about what 1% impact means.
And also, we've had an increase in our capital program in 2019 compared to 2018, so I can provide you with the revised 2019 capital program. Okay.
And that's where I think, this is where it gets a little complicated, because now we have a projected 2019 asset management strategy, and we have now adopted a capital program that probably really should be reconciled. And then, as you said, going forward, 2020 is the year which you'll be deciding on all of this.
Implementation.
Implementation, that's right. But I understand that timing is of importance to get this in.
If I can jump in here on this point, we've committed to supplying sort of not the final report, but to be blunt, a final draft by tomorrow night that will be posted for public review, recognizing that we're going to the public on Tuesday. So, we would have to understand that, in all likelihood, to make the public meeting on Tuesday, we've got to go forward with our existing information and maybe verbally, if that's agreeable, talk to that issue on Tuesday night. That I'm assuming it's not a huge change. It's a relatively minor change, if I can say that. So we could correct it, and we're coming back to you. It's in my calendar, but it's February 19th or 20th with the final report. And we certainly would provide a draft well in advance of that with the amended numbers. But I think the big thing now is the public meeting Tuesday night. So we can go forward. We'll post for the public a report that probably won't have the updated capital plan.
And that's fine, and we'll just speak to that those amendments will be made when it's finally put before council.
And
Is that the end of your
that's
presentation?
the end of my presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, Wayne and John. Yeah, there's been some decisions made here today that'll affect it slightly, but I think it's just proactive. The 1% doesn't mean we're not going to go with your options, just we're in a situation where we have a low tax levy for this fiscal year, and we're just being proactive and getting something put aside. Doesn't mean we're only going with 1%. It just means we're going to do it starting now instead of next year. I'm going to open it up to the floor for council. I'm supposed to start with Councillor Goyda. So.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for coming today and for your presentation and for leaving and coming back again. I also just wanted to take a minute and thank the staff that have been working on this, because I know that this has been quite an ordeal to put this together. So I just wanted to let the staff know that it's very much appreciated. As I was reading through the report, I was looking through these appendices at the end, which have kind of like a greater breakdown of option 1, 2, and 3. And I'm trying to connect these to the charts that you are proposing to show the public on Tuesday night. And when I look through the option 3, I'm trying to connect. So we're proposing a 3% tax impact, but only for the next 4 years, and then it goes down quite substantially below 1%. And I think that I've made the connection, and that it's that we want to sort of heavily fund it in the beginning to get to that target level sooner. And I'm just wondering, are the impacts of sort of evening that out a little bit more over the course, does that then translate into incurring more debt?
Yes. So I use the 1, 2, and 3%. I don't want to say that's arbitrary, but 1, 2, and 3%. And of course, you can see the 3% gets you to that sustainable level of funding soonest, or the earliest. If you go with the 2%, it means there's going to be less money in the reserves in those earlier years, which means there'll be a requirement to issue more debt. And there's some tables in there which sort of show the debt requirements by year for each option, and the level of debt that's remaining at the end of the 10 years, which will be serviced in future operating budgets.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that right. Also in this chart, and you touched on it a little bit today, it shows the, again, with option 3, the minimum balance at 10% year capital plan, and there's a number there. But then there's another number that shows target balance at 20% year capital plan. And I'm not clear how that number comes into play, that
It's-
20%?
It's the maximum, and there are some municipalities that could have set aside significant funds, and at some point in time, we're more than, have more than ample money in our reserve to address the needs. And so having a cap, right now, you're at the bottom.
Right.
But should circumstances change, you don't need to have more than 20%.
Is that 20% something we should be working towards as we go, year to year to year, that we should be increasing it past that 10%?
You want to be at least 10%. Should you start getting closer to 20%, you can have that discussion. How, going forward, looking at future years and your needs, and what level of risk you have and how much debt you're issuing, if any. Usually by that point in time, you're adequately funded. But I think that discussion is something that you would
We're not
have
there.
probably long in the future.
not
But
there yet,
by at least having the cap, it's a range.
Okay. Sorry, I just have to flip to the correct pages in here because I had a couple other questions. In the capital plan and the chart you showed again today with the funding that's needed over the next, the funding that's needed over the next 10 years, it talks about static inputs and dynamic inputs, and I couldn't follow what that meant.
Yeah, and certainly there are certain inputs that are objectively obtained. And Andrew certainly as a modeler can speak more to it, but and then there's those where are a little bit more subjective, where staff are having to, and ourselves are having to make decisions and input it in regard to the data sets that are created for the assets, because objective data may not be there and be available.
Okay.
Reasonably good.
Okay. And then my last question is, in one of your recommendations, you talk about technical level of service. And I forgot to write down the page that was on under the recommendations, and there was an implication of, I think, $30,000 for that. And I couldn't follow what that was relating to.
Probably isn't, do you recall 30,000? It would probably be some reports. Was it a report?
Yes.
Hold on one second. Could you
Andrew,
maybe,
you're
could
gonna
you
have to
come
come
up
down
and down?
to the mic.
You might have to bring a chair, please.
I'm trying to find it as I'm talking to you. I'm sorry I didn't write the page down.
If you could give me a reference page.
Oh, I can turn to it.
Do you know where it is? Yeah.
It's page 180 of the report.
Yep.
Thank you, Mary.
Section 18.8.
Go ahead, you can talk to it. If you want to speak to it, I can speak to it, but,
No, you go ahead.
okay. So,
Page 215 of 499 of your agenda package.
right, so the service level policy that's been established in the PowerPoint and also in the report is based off of sort of our understanding of the assets at a higher level, but it hasn't really broken everything down to the technical level of service, which is essentially asset performance over time. So using technical metrics to actually establish level of service. However, for road assets, for example, there is technically a technical level of service because we've established at a PCI of 60. That would be the service level that for all road segments of the township of Pushlands. However, for sidewalks, for example, it only uses the linear depreciation curve in order to establish life cycle activities. So all assets that don't have a report or some sort of methodology for establishing life cycle activities, they would have to be assessed and then implemented into a technical level of service strategy. That would be the whole point of the consultant services.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the $30,000 was just to say that there's some areas where improved data is needed to adhere to specific pieces of legislation, and that's going forward work. You have to understand that the asset management plan, we regard this as step one, and I think most municipalities do. There's going to be an evolution over time as the data improves where there will be amendments. And we've recommended in here, as a minimum, amend the document every year. The legislation, I think, assumes that you're going to implement it every 2 years, because your data theoretically has to be less than 2 years old in terms of populating your data set. No one in the province, in my opinion, has achieved that level. That's mandated. But over time, each year it should get better, and there'll be an improvement in terms of the technical level of service insofar as legislation, which should be objective and not be based on necessarily the opinion of people. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Willis?
Yes, a quick question. Are we just doing the slides now, or are we doing the report at the same time? Councillor, go ahead and went to the report.
Yeah, and I was just speaking to Madam CEO, we were just discussing that. We definitely are going to go through the proposed level of changes. I think we should just talk about the slides here for now. And then
I apologize.
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry about
I
that.
need direction on it, so, yeah, just what they were going to propose to the public, and then we're going to have to go through the policies.
Okay. Okay, yeah, okay, so on the slides, you got the proposed level of service policies. Are you intending to read each of these out?
Well, our time frame through discussion with staff is that our presentation should be limited to 30 minutes for the public. Obviously, if I have to read them all out,
Just let me interject here for a second. What I'll do is I'll read through the slides. I'll ask council if they have any questions or concerns, and I'd like you to stay just to answer the questions.
No, I'm asking him at the presentation to the public.
Oh.
Is the intent for him to read out all those slides verbatim type of thing? Because we're not going to be there in half an hour.
Yeah, no, I think he meant for right here.
Oh, for here, I don't have a
I
problem.
think generally, I can say this to you right now, generally there's not, other than roads, and at the end of the day, it all balances out with roads. But generally, what we're doing is just repeating the level of service that you presently provide in terms of your assets. And in some cases, we've just basically modernized them. In our report, we detail both your existing levels of service and our proposed level of service from a time frame of a half an hour for the public meeting. There's no way I can go through all of that. So I'm going to go through very quickly, and I'll make a statement at the meeting that we're consistent with what they do right now. We're just updating the description of what they're doing to include legislation, such things as legislation.
Okay, on your slide 26, where you have the debt capacity comparison, is there a way you can quantify the amount of debt we have to take out for the public? Because that'll be a question I'm sure they'll ask is, under each option, what's the amount of debt you have to take back? And then the other corollary to that question is, at the end of 2028, under option 3, what is the amount of debt we still have outstanding, and what happens to that debt as time progresses?
It's frozen.
Okay.
Okay now?
Okay, so we have what is,
26.
so that's based on, down, right there. So,
One more, yeah, that one.
so that's based on debt servicing. That's the amount you pay annually to service the debt that you've incurred. That could be converted to the debt. Now, actually, it's hard to convert to a debt amount because you have your outstanding debt, which is going to be paid off over the remaining life of that debt, which could be 1 year or could be 10 years, depending on when those debt amounts were issued. Because you're in the report, you're pretty much issuing debt come 2019, and that's going to be serviced over 10 years. 2020 and 2028 is going to be serviced between 29 and 38. So I could identify in the discussion at the presentation the amount of debt that's outstanding under the three option. That's presented actually in the report you
It is
have.
presented, there's 2.5 million at the, for option 3 at the end of 10 years. So my question is, okay, if that's 2.5 million, how much did we take out initially to get to the 2.5 million? And then how fast do we
So you're
eliminate
looking
that
for
debt?
sort of the total level of debt that was incurred under each option. Now, those are totals. Now, I don't know in the report whether I have that.
All I'm saying is this question's going to be asked. I'm suggesting
Okay,
to be prepared for that
Have the answer.
question, have the answer. I don't expect you
I
to
know
have
the
it here.
appendices have, each of the appendices for each option has a debt continuity schedule.
Yes, but, you know, I think you should make some assumptions. It's a 10-year, per year type of thing, debt assumption type of thing, and you're going to be taking out, I don't know, $10 million, and you're going to be paying 7.5 by 2028, leaving 2.5. I don't know what the number is.
I'll have those answers. I don't know if they're actually in the report where it indicates the total level of.
No, I couldn't find it anywhere. Perhaps you do have it, but I couldn't find it anywhere, other than adding up each year by year type of thing. Okay, that's fine. That's all the comments I had with respect to presentation.
Councillor Roth.
I think I'm okay.
Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you. Yeah, I just have two things for the presentation. One is some confusion even for us here, for me, was what is the actual potential implementation date? Even when we were having our discussions about putting the extra 1% aside in our regular budget, I was in my mind thinking we're putting 1% aside to just the regular discussion, with the anticipation that if we implement this year, the addition that we'd have to assign to asset management would be 2%. Coming to a total of 3%. But perhaps what we're going to end up with is we put 1% this year, and when we implement it next year, it'll be 2% the first year and 3% the second. So if we could clarify when we're talking about actually implementing this, since it does show numbers for 2019, but maybe what we've talked about today suggests we're actually implementing it for 2020. Does that make sense, or have I misunderstood something?
Am I going, or are you going? Well, certainly, we need to know, you've got to tell us, and we heard some discussion this morning. Our intent right now was that our first year would be 2019. And I think that's the basis on which we started the project through discussions with staff.
Okay.
So if we're talking about a deferral for a year to 2020, and then we add an extra year at the end, that probably would be the outcome. I think you're going to have to tell us,
Yeah.
based on the discussion this morning, and I think that's what I would expect would come from Mary, would be the available funds based on what you are, I assume, in the process of adopting, that's going to be available each year. And then John will build on those available dollars. And then the only issue becomes, we probably have to look at a rerun on the capital plan.
Okay. And so that's what you need, Madam CAO, have we come to a determination yet? I have it in my mind whether it's a 2019 or 2020, or maybe I've misunderstood. Implementation start date for this.
I think based on the discussions just that occurred prior to the presentation, I think that you're looking at an implementation of 2020 with, if they can, recognize the 1% injection that we're doing for this given year.
Okay. That's how I kind of understood how our discussions went too, so. So the other thing I had, two things regarding the service level standards. One is it possible to have some printed out so people, if they get there early, they want to read those, so we don't have to read them out?
Certainly, I mean, The anticipation at the beginning was that, of this project, was that the public meeting wouldn't be huge in terms of the numbers of people, but there'll be some. But here it is. This is my set. Certainly, I could provide something like this with 2 screens, and that's what we would be looking at. So I guess my question, you specifically mentioned service levels. So if you were expecting that we, and this isn't a problem, that we also supply the financial strategy, I would need to know that. But if it's just the service levels, that's going to be about 6 or 7 pages.
Okay, I just think.
Color printed.
Because if we weren't gonna read them out, and those are the things that some might be there to, to learn about, especially roads, as you mentioned, if they won't have time to read them off the screen, but I guess we can direct them to the website to get them if they want them.
Yes.
Okay.
We can bring copies.
Okay, thank you. I had a note regarding the report, but they also relates to the presentation, about the wording of the piece regarding the hydrants, the fire reservoirs. In the report, it's quite clear in the description and the preamble to the policy that we're talking about municipally owned fire reservoirs, but the policy as it's written uses the phrase all fire reservoirs, which suggests that service level policy would apply to non-municipally owned, and I wasn't sure which was I know right now, we used to inspect them all and do them all for free. Now I think we inspect them all and then bill back. Is that policy consistent with how we want it to be worded?
Well, our assumption is, and I think we added them, that we are only talking those reservoirs that are your responsibility. So if they're located on private property, for instance, and they're not your responsibility, we verified such during the process. So we're talking reservoirs that are the direct responsibility of the municipality.
And that's clear in the preamble to the draft service level policy. And what is not clear in the wording of the draft service level policy, because it uses the word all fire reservoirs.
And I'll certainly edit that this afternoon or tomorrow.
It's just all
and I'll
municipal
clarify
ones.
that.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. That's it for the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I think we'll move towards the township current level service policies, the proposed versus, and I'd ask you to stay, and we'll progress through those. And the first one that I have is the bridges and culverts, and what I'm proposing is I'll just open it to council if they have any questions or concerns, and then if they can address them. Page 34 of 309.
Oh, you're going to go through each? Okay.
Yeah, from my understanding, we're going public with this on Tuesday, right? So we need to make sure that we have these service level policies in place. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Yeah.
What page did we say? 34?
Oh,
34?
Yeah.
I don't have that on page 34.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand this. I thought we're going with the presentation to the public and then get their input on this. And I would assume that staff have already reviewed this and have massaged it to their liking. Is that not correct?
Yeah, but we do want to make sure that council is comfortable with the service level policies that are going to be presented to the public, because this report will also be made available to the public. But as the consultant has indicated, there will be some amendments made to the policy just based on other discussions that staff has had with the consultant. So if there are any concerns with the service levels at this point, if we should just clarify. I think you're likely comfortable with what they are, but I just want to make sure that you are before we go to the public meeting.
Okay, that's fine.
So it's on page 70 of 499.
I was in the specific document, sorry.
That's why I went.
Just give me a moment here.
So we're looking at the report or the policies?
We'll go to the
report.
agenda. Sorry, I was in the specific, no, I bet you my computer will not work. Let's see, let's hope. Just give me a moment, bear with me.
70.
All right, here we go. So everybody's on page 70?
Well, I'm sorry, which report are we looking?
We're back on the agenda.
Okay, and it's which document in the agenda?
We're on Bridge and Culverts 5.1.
The service level policy?
Correct.
And this is part of the report, or this is not part of there were two documents. One was the giant report, and there was a 9-page policy for adoption.
I think this is part of the giant report.
Okay, got it. I'm on it.
Right?
I'm not.
Okay.
My report is, how many pages did you say? Mine's 309 pages.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. There's some that are on the actual council agenda package, and that's page 70 of 499.
Oh,
I was
okay.
on,
I know,
Oh, I gotta go back to the council.
I understand. Yeah.
You don't have the same.
Oh,
so similar.
You're page 34.
I'll get them set up if you want to keep going.
Okay, so, well, I'll wait for him.
okay. You
Well,
get
here,
me
he
set.
has it visually in
All
front
right,
of him.
go. Let me hold you up.
Okay, so this is the
Not there either.
proposed policy. Do you want me to wait, Councillor Palmer?
Oh, no, I'm not organized that way. So I've done it by report, not by parts of report. So,
Okay. All right, so this is just the proposed level service for the, where am I here, Bridge and Culverts. If you have any questions or concerns, and also I'd like to just mention to the Director of Public Works that if you have your concerns, just speak up. I'm not going to ask you each individual time, so if you have a concern, I'd appreciate you just raising or interjecting. Okay, so Bridges and Culverts, there's a new policy there. Looks like possible budget implications. Pardon me? Everybody's good? 15,000. Do we have any questions or comments on that? Councilor Swoosh?
Yes, this came from the report of Alaska Now. Your study uses a different bridge conditioning index than the MTO do, and then yet you refer to the regulations here.
Yes, and again, we didn't do this work. The township had a separate consultant do the work in terms of bridge inspections. So we've just taken data out of it. We're basically saying here that, yes, you should adhere to the Ontario Structural Inspection Manual, and there's provision and there's a reg in regard to that. The methodology that was used by the qualified engineer was maybe a little bit different than what you may expect, but it does adhere, as I understand it, to the standards of the province.
Okay, I beg to differ, but like for instance, the poor is BCI less than 60, and we're classifying poor as a much higher number in your report.
Yeah, that was what the consultant used, as I understand it.
Well, to be,
Yeah.
the BCI, as it's been extracted from the report, ranges between 0 and 100. The rating system has been established by UEM as it's been standardized for all asset classes. So the rating, as it is a number, is direct from the report, but as it's been classified as good, fair, poor, those 5 categories have been classified by UEM using a standardization process. And it's akin to road surfaces, which are everything above 95 is excellent, and then it steps down in the same process as.
Okay, I don't want to debate this here, but all I'm saying is we're asked to follow a provincial requirement, and MTO have a different BCI index for the evaluation of their bridges, and yet we're doing something that's even more onerous on us if I look at the numbers. That's your comment.
No, I shouldn't say no. We've interpreted the information right out of the report of the consultant. We've assigned as a universal for this project, the rating system, but if you can get by very poor and poor, the numbers that are in the report are consistent with the recommendations we make in terms of project costs.
Okay, I understand where your report went. I understand why you made the recommendations the way you did. I just find this not consistent. We're following provincial legislation and not using the same BCIs that they do. That's fine. That's the comment I have.
Any other questions or comments on that? So if I get you, what you're trying to say, Councillor Sapoulos, is that under the other standard, the BCI 60 wouldn't be considered poor.
Well, the BCI is, BCI less than 60. Maintenance work is usually scheduled within 1 year. Fair is 60 to 70, and I think we rated significantly less than that.
Yeah, so I think that's the concern.
That's a
You get little bit different on
concern.
Mason
My
and
concern is that I understand the BCI that they have used, I understand the logic, and yet here we have a standard that says use the provincial legislation, which categorizes the BCIs differently. So it's consistently inconsistent.
Okay. And, I mean, is that something that,
It's not something that's going to affect the overall approach to our thing, so it's just a,
comment, okay.
Timing, it'll change the timing though, I believe.
Yeah, slightly, right?
yeah, it'll change the timing, and same thing applies to roads as well.
Okay. So any comments? The next one is gravel roads with the current township policy. You know, so we're looking at with the proposed service policy is a increase in gravel base 6,000 per average from intersection to intersection for, that might even be covered in the consultants that we're going to use. They would maybe indicate that, would they not? I think this is,
I would assume so.
right? But, is there any other questions or comments on that? Okay. Jessica?
I do just have one question. And I apologize that I should have asked this question prior to now, but I just am wondering, the full regrading is completed more than 6 times during each 2 consecutive non-winter periods. Why did we decide on that number? What did that 6, like, where did that come from?
From the very beginning of this assignment, there was some discussion in regard to gravel roads and the cost of gravel roads and when when there would be funding and consideration for alternatives, i.e. going to a hard surface on the gravel road. So we were looking at data that was available, and we mentioned some of that data under the source documents. And it was very common in terms of the source documents to, when you are grading an abnormally large number of times, let's just say based upon traffic, there's a huge volume of traffic. It starts driving a process whereby you should be considering alternatives to simply just continuing to spend maintenance dollars. Should you be looking at a capital improvement?
I understand that. I'm just wondering why that number's not 5 or 4. Like, where did the 6 come from?
It was a bit subjective. We looked at the documents, and some of the documents and I got to admit, some of them were U.S. orientated because there's been a lot more work done in the States on this issue than there has been in Canada. We're using 6, and we looked at areas that had cold weather, freezing and thawing. There is some work, and we've talked with staff about this. The Ontario Good Roads Association do have a working group who are very interested in this topic, and my understanding from one of our fellow employees is that they may be coming up with some recommendations relatively quickly. And this may drive an amendment. I don't want to be long-winded here, but this is a living document, and I think you can expect periodic changes to it. And there should be.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. We'll move on to hard surface roads. So the upgraded UEM proposed level of service. So this here's traffic volume study we discussed earlier. And any questions or comments on this?
Those are hard surface roads.
Yeah. I'm on page 72. And it's the new policy.
No, sorry.
Okay, again, The way this is set up is the way I understand it. It's a PCI of 60. We start remediation work. Again, you look at your asset management plan, you have a very low opinion of this road. You classify it as poor type of thing, whereas here you're saying it's fair. So again, the inconsistency between the two descriptors.
Yeah, the final report will reflect a change in the rating. We were working on that this morning in the room, but you will see a change in that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, actually, I just noticed in this report that it says that our current service level policy for paved roads is a PCI value of 60, but that number should be 65.
Whether-
Yes, and we made that change this morning.
Okay.
We added some more verbiage to our report in regard to this particular area, a paragraph, not a huge amount, but it explains and clarifies the 60-60-60 in your current standard.
But our current standard is 60,
65.
60, 65, right?
Our current standard is 65, based on the pavement condition index report that was done in 2016. I just wanted to clarify that for council.
But we're recommended, it's being recommended we move to 60-60-60. And
Correct, that's what
Correct.
this report is recommending.
Is there any discussion on that? Do we want to? Actually, that will probably save us some money in the long, because you let the road deteriorate well. And here's that double-edged sword.
Extend the life.
Extend the life slightly, so Councillor Smith.
But isn't there a criteria on the class of road? You have to have the speeds and the volumes dictates when you should be replacing it. Otherwise you degrade the road to a lower speed.
I'm not aware or familiar with that comment, Councilor Stapoulis. The speed and traffic volumes give the roadway a classification.
Correct.
My concern on this report is the class 3 being at a PCI of 60. We're talking about our heaviest traveled roads here,
Exactly.
right? At a 60, you're getting in the same category of a road that,
Exactly.
sees a couple hundred cars a day compared to a couple thousand. So my opinion is that at least the class 3 should be going back to a 65.
That's exactly my point. If you look at the, I think MTO standards tell you, you should be striving for 65 at this particular volume and speed.
Yes. So do we need a consensus from council to maybe put the class 3 road to a BCI of 65?
I would leave it up to the director to make his recommendations.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. So you've heard the director.
So can that change be made in time for the public presentation?
Yeah, yes, the change can be made in the screens easily, no problem there. What it will drive is an amended, and again, it's not going to be huge, but it'll drive an amended capital plan that will increase in dollars, but percentage-wise, not significant.
Question is, the capital works program that you have given these gentlemen, I assume it's based on the 65 already?
Yeah, so the pavement condition index report was based on 65.
And the capital program is based on that as well, is it not?
Don, you can elaborate on that, I think, more.
Yeah,
Okay.
So it shouldn't be any change. It's just a number here we're talking about.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that? All right. We'll move on next to the stormwater management ponds. Any questions or comments on that? Councilor Goyda? Councilor Spillis? Okay. Stormwater management systems does not, so now we're on page 74. This is the stormwater management systems. Any questions or comments? I don't see any. All right, here's going to be one that we're going to talk about. Now we're on to street trees. Any questions or comments on the street trees? Councillor Rowe?
This one just
Says baby.
This one blows me away. We live in a rural community with trees along sides of our side roads that are complete dangerous. And here we are talking about trees in subdivisions, and I don't even know why we're discussing this one.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Sure. Trees are indicated in the regulation, and that's why, as specifically green infrastructure. We did have discussions with staff, and the decision was made, which I support, that we would deal with those trees planted in subdivisions, and that the trees that exist along roads, some of which probably are on the right-of-way, some are off, will continue be dealt with by the Works Department as problems come up.
Okay.
Okay. I still can't buy into this one. To spend $6,000 to inspect these trees that to me are causing no danger, no risk. If one dies, cut it down, plant a new one. Like, I don't understand this one at all. But if it's got to be there, it's got to be there.
Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you. Yeah, I share some of these same concerns, and from the limited experience I have with forestry is would it be possible to include a caliber, the breast height as a trigger for when we start this, so that we're not inspecting trees that are 3 or 5 years old that are only 2 inches around, but perhaps when subdivision trees get to a certain size, then the program comes into place, so that we're not inspecting, as Councillor Ross says, trees that are planted on the roadside that are 6 feet tall.
Yeah, and I must admit, none of us on our team are horticultural specialists or arborists. So we did have a discussion with a graduate from the University of Guelph, and certainly there was recommendations that they be inspected every 5 years to determine maintenance requirements, and that's why we limited it to street trees in that they were identifiable and they're fairly easy to classify. So I think it's your decision. From our perspective, we've got to identify them, and that should continue, and that may evolve over time. Whether you want to inspect them will be your decision, whether you want that removed from the service level policy.
Well, I'd like to see the service level policy include some time that they need to be there before they become part of the inspection program, so that they have a chance to become a risk worth managing.
Yeah. And certainly we, in the policy, we've suggested that after the tree's been accepted by the municipality, and that's subject to the policies of the municipality. Very often, a tree isn't accepted for 2 years, but I don't know what your policy is. And in some cases, it's longer if the subdivision hasn't been accepted by the municipality, and then we would only inspect every 5 years. And that's why we did say tree inspections, $6,000, and there is a slight amendment that says every 5 years.
Yes, I support that piece.
And that will be in the final report. Well, I can't say final. The draft that that will be posted for the public meetings.
Okay. Councillor Bruno?
I just want to make sure I understand correctly. You're saying that to have the trees inspected is sort of up to us if we want to have that done or if we don't?
Well, I would recommend that they should be inspected. I'm suggesting every 5 years. There may be need for maintenance on the tree. it could be diseased or whatever. Someone's got to look at it. I know I'm sure the Works Department staff would see it when they're driving around, but the common practice is to inspect. And I'm suggesting 5 years would mean your first one, the tree's probably realistically going to be 7 years old.
Okay, thanks.
Louis?
I'm struggling with this one because I don't see street trees as being a priority for us. It's these big 50-plus-year-old trees within our right-of-way that are the problem. I was wondering if we can reclassify this and call it street trees in general, and then have a paragraph someplace here that we will look at developing a policy for roadside maintenance of roadside trees type of thing. I really see this as being something the public will say, what are you guys talking about? This doesn't make sense.
So how is it written, Madam CEO, that they've specifically identified subdivision trees, or we just have to have a tree policy in place?
Well, the asset management, correct me if I'm wrong, registry requires you to identify them as an asset. So that's why they're here. I guess if you were to identify all the trees that we have on the various roadways in the township, you're going to be looking at a very different number. So that's why through discussions, it was determined that we would just include those trees that are part of a subdivision. Perhaps maybe if, I know that the consultant has indicated that the tree inspection is $6,000, and he's going to indicate every 5 years, perhaps then that, as we just move forward, staff brings forward information in terms of when this would be implemented, and just looking at the overall tree program, how we're going, like what we do overall, and then what we're going to do moving forward, and when that would commence.
Okay, I don't expect to see a report saying we got 5,000
No.
trees here. Well, my concern is the trees that need to be taken care of for whatever the problem is right off the bat.
Yeah, so I guess that's, I think we need to look at that separately from this right now, because if we identify all those, we don't know what all those impacts are right now from the data. So maybe if we look at it, that as we gather more information, we can perhaps then put it in
Okay,
to
perhaps
here.
there should be a caveat here that there's something that's going to be done in the future, or something that allays the public's concern, because I can see this being a lightning rod.
Councillor Roth?
This has got to be more for an urban municipality than a rural municipality. Because this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And with the emerald ash borer now, I'm sure that cities are having a huge problem with street trees, because they're dying on them at a very fast rate. And I don't know how this can add anything to our risk factor, and I thought that was a big part of asset management.
It is, and all I'm saying is that green infrastructure is identified in the reg. So I think it's important that we recognize that. There's very minimal expenditure here. In fact, there's none other than,
I got to go out about something.
yeah. I can tell you that, I mentioned administratively, I was responsible for trees in a municipality not too far from here. And certainly, I agree with the comment. Emerald ash borer was a huge, huge concern. And we ended up classifying every tree on either public property or the street rights of way in the city of Brantford, primarily because they knew that something like 40% of the trees were going to be gone. But in your case, in some ways, it was it's a placeholder as the knowledge grows in regard to trees in your municipality. And I think that's why, in consultation with staff, when we had discussions, we said, let's just deal with the subdivision trees. We know how many there are, we know where they are, and it was my suggestion, based upon my previous life, well, we should at least look at them. If they're in the municipal right-of-way, they should be formally inspected. So I recommended an inspection every 5 years. If you wanted to remove that and just leave it as a placeholder, recognize it's there until at some point in time you evolve a policy in regard to trees, then that's fine too. In the long term, it's minimal in terms of its impact on what we're doing, but it recognizes the requirements of the regulation.
Councillor Bulmer?
Yeah, just one last point on this one. I guess around here, it can take 7 or 8 years to grow a Christmas tree, so I don't see those are a risk that needs to be managed. So is it possible that we can put something in this policy about the service levels that we don't start this program until the trees have been there for X period of time? You know, so that if they're there 10 years after the subdivision is adopted, we can start this program, or 15 years after the subdivision is adopted, then the trees have a chance to become a hazard before we're spending money in inspecting them. Because otherwise, if the road super, see a dead tree, I'll take care of it. You know what I'm trying?
Well, yeah, I can certainly add a paragraph if you want and take the 5-year inspection out. I'll
Well, I
leave
don't mind the
that.
5-year inspection, just, it doesn't start, give it
Well,
more
right
time.
now, it looks, in reality, it's probably 7 years right now with this policy. Because it doesn't start until the tree's been accepted by the municipality. So it's been planted and it's been allowed to grow, and normally you wouldn't accept a tree for at least 2 years. So we're at 7 years as a minimum. If you wanted a statement in there that said the initial inspection should be 10 years after it's been planted, and then every 5 years, we could do that.
Is council supportive of that? That would give us a little bit of face with it.
I'm okay with that, but I still think we should have a sentence in there with respect to roadside trees, saying something along the lines that we're looking at it to be included at a later date or something like that. It's important.
This is
That
a
is a
live,
gre- This is a greater risk than anything else.
yeah, and this is a live document. I mean, we're going to be discussing the roadside trees later, so that'll help, facilitate policy in this asset management. But adding one now would be prudent. I think, are we in agreement with that right now? We can, happy, Councillor Bulmer?
Yep, thanks.
Okay, we'll move on. I don't have any more. Building and facilities. Do you have any questions or comments on that? Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, I don't think you should have a structural engineer addressing electrical, HVAC, or mechanical equipment. Is under proposed level service, the qualified structural engineer shall have the necessary expertise.
Just an engineer, qualified engineer.
You're either one or the other. There's very few engineers who have all those qualifications.
Any other questions or comments? So we're going to need to amend that. I'll let you.
Should be amended.
Okay. You need wording from us? So if you want to, no? Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you for that, Councillor Spoulos. All right, fire equipment. Any questions or comments on the fire equipment? Let's see. Fire reservoirs, any questions or comments? I think, Councillor Palmer, you alluded to some wording in here.
Yeah, that's the one I spoke to earlier, where it suggests all as opposed to all municipal.
You, okay. Any
Just a comment, the fire department shall inspect to ensure structural integrity. I don't know if our fire department's qualified to look at it from a structural point of view. I would think you'd want somebody else doing it.
Is the intention of that when you open the lid and you look in, make sure it has water? Is that kind of the intention?
Yeah, and if the intention was if it was empty, and we did have discussions, assuming you've got someone in the fire department does, qualified in confined space, I would think they would go down and when it is empty, and occasionally they're going to have to pump it out, have a look, and just take a look. And are you seeing exposed rebar, et cetera, versus paying someone, a structural engineer, to come in? But I think that would be the level that you would look at
would removing the structural, so the fire department shall inspect the reservoir every 5 years to ensure integrity of the reservoir. You're not really looking at the structural.
I would think that would be more
And
satisfactory.
then it's the integrity, and then it's working still. But the chief is in the audience, but I believe these reservoirs are inspected more frequently than every 5 years, or am I incorrect in that? It's annually, is it not?
Yes, so,
Sorry.
we inspect our own that are owned by the municipality once a year. However, ones that are on private property, we have a service, we recommend that they have to actually have a service provider go out and do the inspection for them, and then send us the documentation.
So-
And it's based on what you see there, the fire code that's listed, and the NFPA standard that they have to meet those requirements.
Yeah, so we're not going to run into a situation where we have a reservoir empty for 5 years, is what I was concerned with. We're going to catch it early. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, we'll go next. Municipal assets, fleet. Any questions or comments with this policy? Does Director of Public Works have any concerns? No. Okay, that's good. Oh, did I miss one? Nope. Just hang on one second. All right, the next one is Parks and Recreation. There we go, inspections.
Just a type on the first line.
Okay.
Monthly, not monthly.
Oh, yes, there was a typo on the monthly, not monthly. See that? Any other comments? Concerns? No. Okay. Regulatory signs, warning signs. And township, yeah. All right, any questions on the regulatory signs for the township?
I defer to our director.
Yep, I'm looking. Nope. If you don't speak up, I'll just,
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll go to the next one. Sidewalks, township sidewalks. Any questions or comments here? No? Okay. Streetlights and poles. And any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
The only one concern I have, and it's not with the document, it's just to be advised that, to inspect the poles and the arms of the poles, obviously, we don't have the equipment to do that. We can't get up there to have a look, so, I'm not sure if just a visual from the ground level is fine, or do we really need to get up there and have somebody get up there and poke around?
In cases where, for instance, if it's a rental or you're occupying a pole that's part of the local utility, they certainly, I would think, should be inspecting. I think it's difficult for Works Department staff simply to look up at a fixture and know everything's all right, but I'm assuming because they're LED, you're not having a relamping program anymore.
No.
Yeah, so no one's really looking at it. I just wonder, I would have to talk to some of our people and see whether, and I've got to go back and read the minimum maintenance standard in regard to luminaires and the poles. My suspicion is that in the majority of the times that you would worry, 95% of them you could probably identify from the ground, but there will be some electrical problems. What we noticed was that there was just a few situations where the poles were starting to corrode and crack. And that doesn't mean they're going to fail. And we did point out where those were, south of the 401. And that type of inspection should occur to determine if there's any issue of potential failure. And that could be done from the ground. But my feeling is that someone should be looking at the arm and the fixture periodically.
So all I'm trying to get across is if this is something that, you know, we're going to adopt on this, then going forward, obviously, there's going to have to be funding available to have a contractor come in and perform that inspection.
Which isn't part of the current budget.
That is correct.
So are we going to look for a quote on inspection of our,
Well, I think maybe if Wayne can just consider what type of, the nature of the inspection, and then we'll have to build in a cost associated with that
And frequency.
and frequency.
I'll do that tomorrow.
okay? Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Do we actually need them?
This one's easy, sewage assets. Water assets.
If I can just respond to that, these are placeholders only. We realize you don't provide those services, but it builds the registry so that spots are there to be populated in the future.
So I think that, oh. Mr.
Got a question on the parklands. Does parklands include things like playing field appurtenance, like soccer posts, fencing around tennis courts?
No, those were all in Parks and Recreation. The parklands, and we never dealt with this, but that would be, and again, looking at the regulation, if for some reason you owned a woodlot, that would be deemed to be parkland, and that in itself likely drives some considerable costs, because you, especially if you allow public access to it, then that would drive some sort of a maintenance program.
With something like a walking trails?
The walking trails are under Parks and Recreation.
So, okay, we're good then.
Okay, I think that's, oh, Councillor Bulmer?
I just had an idea pop into my head, unfortunately. We do have a bit of a woodlot. It's part of, currently being used by Public Works. How has that been, you know, the one I'm talking about on Watson Road?
You okay?
Yeah, is any of that considered, that wouldn't fall under this, that we'd have to maintain it if someone chooses to access it?
We haven't included that as a municipal asset. It may be municipally owned land,
Yeah, but, yeah,
we
good.
didn't regard it as a true asset like under parklands.
But just when you mentioned that you have a woodlot somewhere that, uh-oh.
I think the intent there would be you have a woodlot, you want to create some type of an environmental feature and maybe build trails into it. So you're going to need a master plan.
Right.
And there's got to be some other expenditures occurring too, so.
Super.
That's it for policies. And I'm just going to open it up if there's any other questions or comments regarding the asset registry that we would, do you see anything else we need to address?
So is this, we're doing the rest of the report?
Yes.
All right. So,
Do we have some on some of the other reports?
all right, what's the first one then? Hang on a sec. So, we have the asset registry, I guess, is that where we're starting, 6.0 on page?
Well, I can go specifically in my comments, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we do that, and if you have specific comments? Okay, we'll start with,
okay, yeah. Oh, sorry.
I don't have any questions for our delegates. I have a couple of questions for staff. I don't know if if now is the appropriate time to ask them. Sorry. Okay, so in section 9 of this report, this is where all of the individual costs associated with replacement and the year. And I was trying last night to match up these costs into our 10-year capital budget expenditures. And are they in there now or are they not? These still need to be added into the 10-year capital budget?
At this time, I have provided the consultants with what our capital budget and forecast is.
Yep.
Which includes 2019 to 2028.
Yep.
But I have not double-checked to make sure that everything that's in here in 2019 is also in our capital budget and forecast.
Okay, so
Just based on timing.
So some of them may, some of them
Right.
may not, but not for sure. Okay. And my other question is on page 213 of our agenda, which is 178 of the report. This is talking about staffing as it relates to managing the asset management. And this is recommending that we hire, at least how I'm reading it, is that we hire an additional person to deal strictly with asset management. And I'm just wondering if that is, does staff agree that is this of time consuming enough that we need to consider this? And would this then be added into our operating budget for, starting when?
And certainly the consultant can, I know this section, the wording in this section is going to change, just based on some discussions that we've had with the consultant. Right now, we don't know, we can't quantify for council what those needs are specifically. What we can tell you is we know that there is a need for us to have an asset management system from a database point of view to eliminate the need for finance inputting the data into several different systems, being one for budget, one for PSAB reporting, and then one for asset management.
Okay.
So I also know that the treasurers across the county are working together at looking at what that system may be. Some municipalities have already gone forward with purchasing a system, but a majority of them have not within Wellington County. And I know Mary's working with that group to make a determination on what would be best for the township. So what we would be recommending is that there is funds set aside, one for the technological component of it, because we will need to acquire a software system to house this information. And number two, resources needed in terms of ensuring that the integrity of transferring the data that we currently do have that's been developed through this process and transferring that data into that system. So there are resources, human resources required in that regard. However, we don't know the specifics. So we're suggesting that the funds perhaps be put aside, and as Councillor Sapoulis mentioned earlier, that perhaps maybe we put those funds aside from the surplus money that we were talking about earlier, and then staff would come back and let you know what those costs are and how we were approaching implementing this.
Okay, thank you.
I had a lot of small comments, which I assume was passed on to
Yes, it was.
the consultant, but I have a couple of big question items. First of all, when you look at your dynamic and static life cycle inputs, I'm surprised that the asphalt doesn't have a dynamic life cycle input.
So, in review of the 2019 capital budget and forecast, I understand that some road segments are replaced irregardless of their PCI. Well, it's considered, PCI is considered, but it's not final. But in the model, the PCI is the only consideration when setting replacement dates. That's why it's a static input. Whereas if it was modeled to incorporate things such as traffic and the road class and other inputs, then it would be dynamic.
Okay, then help me understand then why our bridge is not static, because that's also based on a bridge condition index.
Because pretty much the capital program for roads can be projected over 100 years, essentially, because the PCI will go down by 2 points per year.
Mm-hmm.
In 20 years, that road will be replaced, and then the cycle continues. However, for bridges and culverts, a consultant scheduled that event on that year, and you can't use the same numbers every year.
Okay, we look into consequences of failure. You applied a equal baseline across all assets. Does that make sense? Because I would argue that one particular asset would have more consequences of failure than another one, like a bridge failing would have more consequences than an asphalt road.
Right. The baseline is only to essentially regard every asset as being a risk, no matter what type of asset class it is. We're just trying to essentially quantify that in reality, every asset can be a risk, and then we further qualify each asset by using the different variables such as health and safety. And you'll see further on in the report that bridges and culverts, despite the baseline, always has a higher consequence of failure.
Yeah, and I expected to see sort of a graduate, right, rather than having a straight across same number.
Yeah.
Evaluating each asset on the risk associated with that asset as a baseline and then projecting upward.
So you think that baseline should just not be considered? It should just go no baseline. It just starts from the beginning.
You can do it that way, or you assume a different baseline for each asset, or you eliminate it all. That's the other way of looking at it. Then you're strictly looking at the inputs from the categories you've provided. So leave it up to you. How do you want to play it? Certainly, it's misleading if you use the same baseline for everything.
I think that the model won't change. If you were to take out the baseline,
No, it won't change. No, I realize that. I'm just curious why it was put in there in the first place.
Right. So I guess it's more, it's not to do anything mathematical modeling. It's just to state that risk is always a factor, and that's why it's a baseline in the model. However, in reality, it doesn't actually have to be in the model at all. In fact, that graphic doesn't necessarily need to be there. It could perhaps be replaced with just a section stating that all assets have a risk, if that is appropriate.
I'll leave it up to you and staff and in terms of timing and all that sort of thing on that one. The last question I have is, in your report, you make reference to having one big reserve for the asset management plan. Currently, we sort of compartmentalize the reserves among different assets. Does it make sense to have one big pocket of money? I'm sure it will simplify things for staff, but is that what's normally done in the other municipalities?
It's not necessarily a recommendation, it's just for the purpose of the analysis to say, this is how much money you, as a municipality, have set aside towards asset management-related activities. And you, on an annual basis, will be contributing towards asset management-related activities an amount each year. So when you add what you currently have in the bank, in all those, the sum total of all those reserve balances, there's no recommendation whether you should be rationalizing. That'd be a different exercise. But maybe that would be something that municipality would want to consider, is rationalizing some of your reserves that you have. Maybe establishing one larger reserve, but there is that administration of, well, who gets what? But right now, we've identified, through your, looking at your reserves, what funds have been set aside for asset management-related purposes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Roth?
Yeah, I think my questions have pretty much been answered, because I did have a concern about the staff member and the technology we're going to need to handle this plan. So I guess that's a discussion we'll have at a future date.
Councilor Bowler?
Thank you. I guess I'll forward, I have some verbiage questions. I guess I'll forward those through the clerk to be addressed, just typos and verbiage stuff. But from a technical side, I look at section 6.9 on gravel roads. It says regulatory warning. Is that because I couldn't quite figure out what that's from. Is it because of the low confidence score on some of the rankings there? Or the ratings?
Oh, you're talking about the table.
Are you talking about the table?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
So there's a table on page 50. Did you say 56?
It was section 6.9.
Yeah.
6.9.
So it's page 93 of 499 of the agenda package.
It read out to me, regulatory warning, that there was one of the ranking went from 25 to 85, and I ranged from 25 to 85. So I wonder what's the regulatory warning there, or am I just it's just reading it to me funny?
Oh, I understand. So you're saying that, so the data confidence scores for inventory and condition for gravel roads is 25%, and the valuation is 85% in the valuation section.
Yeah. So is it because of the low confidence
Yes.
piece? That's why it's flagged as a regulatory warning, or where am I getting that regulatory warning thing? Is it listed there somewhere?
I think that that's the way that the table probably got converted into Word or something, just put them together.
Okay.
So, yeah, they have separate. So gravel roads has a 25% data confidence, whereas regulatory has 100%.
Okay.
They should be separated.
And that was explained why it has a low confidence. Okay.
Yes.
Great. I guess one other piece, uses the word trend of 85.
Yes.
And what's the difference between a trend and a PCI?
Well, the data confidence trend is essentially the data that's been collected so far has been discussed, and we're saying that as in this point in time and times previous, we can say that over time as a trend, we have a confidence that it's good, or we can move forward with this data. But PCI is just a
Okay.
condition index. It's a different classification.
Yeah, it's just the way I'm sorry, it's just the way it read it out to me. I couldn't, it
Oh,
sounded like
okay.
it was coming in
Yeah.
the table the same way. It had
Oh, okay.
it had confidence and trend, and the other tables had confidence and then PCI right afterwards. So.
Oh, okay. So it's the way the table's reading out. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Section 9.2 culverts. They list, each culvert is assigned a different ranking or a rating score in terms of a condition score and a replacement date. But some of them that are in better condition are being proposed to be replaced sooner than those of lower condition. So if I look at the Ellis Road culvert, yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're seeing here.
So the Ellis Road culvert sees a lot more traffic than the Gilmore Road culvert,
Yes.
but it's shown to be replaced later, and it's in worse condition than the Gilmore Road culvert.
Yeah, by 7 points.
Yeah,
So, as stated before, the capital program for bridges and culverts has been established based off the scheduling engineer, and that schedule is between 1 and 5 years, or which is immediate, which is below 1 year, and for Gilmore Road, it just so happened that 5 years from the replacement date, or the schedule, is the minimum. So it's not, condition wasn't considered when doing the replacement year, essentially.
oh, I see, and it's funny, that's how I see this whole program, is that replacement date, upgrading date is driven by the condition.
Yes, for bridges and culverts are the only exception, essentially. It's more of a, and BCI doesn't necessarily tell you when a replacement activity should occur. It's more of the actual detailed level of repairs in the actual tender is different.
Oh,
Yeah.
what needs to be repaired as opposed to when it needs to be repaired.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the reason why the dates are like that.
9.3 roads. I think this was part of the discussion you just had with Councillor Sapoulis. Why they're all ranked at the same, because that's just the way you put it in the model, or?
Yeah, so the threshold for capital planning is PCI level of 60.
Right.
Once the road reaches a PCI of 60, it triggers a life cycle event.
Right, and again, I read this is the condition the roads are now to help plan when they'll be down to 60, when there's, as opposed to, this is where they are.
Yeah, so first asset, which is Victoria Road South, the condition in 2019 will be 60.
Yeah, but they can't all be 60.
Yeah.
They're all listed at 60 for,
Yeah, but it's for that year of replacement, the condition will be 60. As of this year, the condition is not going to be 60, if that makes sense.
okay, yeah, so this is, I misread it then. This is the condition at time of replacement,
Yes.
not the condition that they are now to help us establish when that time of replacement is going to be.
Exactly.
completely read it the other way around, so thank you. Okay. I think you talked about this a little bit earlier about the need and timing of updates. And I think it was section 15 talks about updates, and it's 15.1, we're going to update every 2 years. Wait a second.
Is that 15?
Just want to see if I find it. Oh, it's 17. It's 17.1, ongoing maintenance of the management program. It talks about reviewing the asset hierarchy and consequences of failure being reviewed every year. And I know it doesn't have to be every year, but I thought part of this program, what we're doing is establishing the hierarchy, and that's done in terms of the, and the risk weighting. I'm trying to understand how the risk weighting could change. What would drive that?
I think it would be a significant decision that's been made by council in regard to how they're going to consider risk, and it could be changing requirements of insurance companies, et cetera, and there may be a reason when you start considering risk that there should be there should be a modification. So all we're saying in here is that as a minimum, you should have a team that's representing all of the departments and make sure that all of the assumptions remain valid. And this is not to be a static document. That's why we refer to it as a
Understood.
document.
I just didn't, it seemed fairly more often than I would have expected, because I was trying to figure out if a change in traffic flow would change the risk rating, but earlier I heard that as well, everything's rated with the same risk.
All road segments.
Yeah, so if all road segments are rated the same risk, you're talking about updating the risk weighting of all roads, even though the risk on an individual road may change. It's an inconsistency that I couldn't get my head around, if they're all ranked the same.
So essentially, the way that the consequence of failure score has been generated, this is kind of like the most simple way to do consequence of failure, as in that all assets in an asset class have the same risk because they're all considered the same. But as you get more advanced, you'll consider that each asset has its own parameters associated with it, such as you could do spatial modeling to say that this asset has higher risk, and as you move forward, you might want to implement that with your new system as it moves forward. This is just a
Got it.
baseline. So,
We're talking about a matter of resolution here, of scale, and we're dealing with these on a global level to the point here about insurance. If there's a change in insurance, it applies to all roads, as opposed, okay, so again, I was thinking about it from asset to asset.
right.
Okay. We talked about, let's see, it was section 15.4 talks about purchasing an asset management system, and you mentioned that a little bit earlier. Can you explain to me, to help me understand the difference between the system we would need to buy and the tool that we could use for free that the Good Roads Association provides? How do those two, how are they different, and why can't we use the one to do both?
Well, okay, I don't know which one Pushlinch or staff may be considering in terms of buying. And I'm aware that however, we've been made aware there's discussions by staff of Pushlinch with the other municipalities in the county, and I suppose maybe even with the City of Guelph, I don't know, in regard to their system. We just wanted to make Pushlinch aware that there is a system that, and it's for smaller municipalities, that the Ontario Good Roads Association presently is supporting, that is available for free, and would maintain the asset in potentially a simpler format. they've indicated a willingness to come out and talk to Pushlinch in regard to utilizing that system. And I've certainly been I've had a discussion very briefly with the agent that's responsible for that system in regard to migrating Pushlinch's data into their system. And I've said, well, that has to sit and wait. We're not going to give you Pushlinch's data at this point in time until they're prepared to release it. But, we had one of our technology people look at it. I think OMAFRA, if I've got it right, the Ontario.
Yes.
Yeah. We have been told that they have been in discussions with Good Roads. I don't know how far it's went in regard to or what they would like to see as a product. Certainly, our company feels it's a good product. It would be available for free. And right now, we've had an offer to potentially proceed, subject to the approval of Pushlinch staff, with locating their data into that system to see how it would operate. We think that would be at a higher level. Our concern is that are we going to get the level of reporting out of that system? I think right now it's good up until the generation of a capital plan. And beyond that, in terms of reporting for the municipality, I know there are some, like I said earlier, discussions occurring with finance people in regard to that and the evolution of that product. But I also understand it's not there yet.
So just to clarify then, although those different solutions were discussed in different parts of the report, they can be considered as doing similar things, even though they're not shown in the same section. Because one's called a database tool, one's called a database system, or that has to be in-house, and one's called a asset management tool, suggesting there were two different types of things, but they actually are.
Yeah, there could be an integrated system where it would bring everything together. Right now, it's not, but.
So could we get by with just the
I think
OJR too?
CAO wants to address the.
Yeah, I certainly, we will consider that particular system. Just the concern is that with the new requirement for us to maintain our assets, we don't have one system where we're entering the data in for our different reporting obligations, budget, asset management, and PSAB reporting into one system versus 3 different systems, which is, we would prefer to look at something that is all-encompassing so that staff aren't duplicating or triplicating its efforts in data entry, and then we're just maintaining one source of the information versus 3 different sources where errors then typically do occur.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Moore. Well, thank you very much. Anything I have to bring up seems minor in nature, but I'm looking at through one slide here on page 114. There's an asset that appears to be missing. It's just a sidewalk. And on Main Street in Morrison, there's a little chunk that goes south down to back.
Is that a reference to the map?
Map, yeah. I don't know if it's important or not, but.
Oh, it is. It is important. Where is that? This is the capital plan.
It was at 140.
Ours is, on our agenda, it's 114. I'm not sure what.
114?
On our agenda.
Sidewalk network. So is it the
279 of the.
In what world would that be?
You see the little Main Street?
Yes.
There's a sidewalk that runs from Badnock down to basically back on the west side.
Oh, it starts right, okay, I see.
From the intersection on the north down.
Until it hits back.
Correct. It used to go to back until they paved the road and they dug it up. But
Okay. Okay.
just that little piece is missing.
Yes, that map will be amended and in the registry as well.
The only other thing that I noticed is that the asset of the ball lights at Old Morrison were not listed. There was backstopping for fencing, but there was no mention of the ball lights as an asset.
In Old Morriston?
Old Morrison.
And that's in the back of the report that you look at
Yeah, I was on page, I moved it because I went to this. I can find it quickly. But It's not listed. I think it's a conversation with council. I think it was removed in 2016 as an asset. I would like to maybe have a conversation about having that replaced.
This is Old Marston, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Are these assets that have already been removed?
Oh, they're there.
Oh, they are there, are they?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
still existing. It's a lit ball diamond, our Parks Master Plan. It states that the needs for the township going forward requires 2 lit diamonds. It was removed, I believe, in 2016.
I think the replacement of them was removed. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean the maintenance.
Right.
Do they exist today? Like, are they in place? Okay.
So they're included in the asset registry, they're just not included in the capital plan, the 10-year capital plan.
Well, the process would have to go through council.
Well, the reason they're not included is because as part of the 2016 budget, I believe council directed staff that the replacement of ball diamond lights only occur at one ball diamond, and that was Aberfoyle.
Okay, so I guess that might be a conversation for another time. I'll bring it up. Other than that, I think you've done a wonderful job, as well as our Director of Finance, Mary. I appreciate everything you do for this. It's quite a lot of work that goes into it from staff and yourselves.
Thank you.
Great presentation, and I'll just ask maybe one last time if council has any questions or concerns for,
Respect to this report, no.
no,
There's another report we still.
yeah, okay, regarding these individuals? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so, I'm going to read this off quickly.
That's this one.
Oh, okay, fair enough, okay.
I'm going to receive the
Okay, so
delegation.
that's the same thing, okay.
Okay, moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Sepoulos. The council received the presentation by Wayne Wood, Senior Consulting Engineer and Project Manager, Urban and Environmental Management, Inc., and John Murphy, Municipal Finance Specialist, DFA Infrastructure International Incorporated, with respect to Plus Lunch Asset Management. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Sepoulos, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that report finance 2019-001 regarding Ontario Regulation 588/17 Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure be received. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Bulmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 005-2019 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the Township of Puslinch at its meeting held on the 30th day of January 2019. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Bulmer, the council hereby adjourns at 12:57 PM. All in favor?